Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled Parent Stories. Today we have a very special episode for you, a compilation of some of the greatest entitled parent stories we read over the past year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few hours of the most entitled parents you've ever heard of. And by the way, Karen assured me that if this video gets 1,000 likes, she won't try to speak to anyone's manager for an entire week. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. And become an official member of the Re-Army today, and I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming video. r/Entitled Parents. Karen messes with my job, she gets fired and loses her boyfriend thanks to her Instagram. Alright, circa 2014, I worked for a large movie theater chain in a small Midwestern city. Job was pretty awesome outside of the crappy pay and essentially no way to move up. I like to think I'm good at my job, and I try my hardest no matter where I work. In this particular situation, I was one of the most tenured employees at the theater, except for two older folk who had worked there part-time on the side and had full-time jobs elsewhere. So for the sake of this story, I need to tell you about Jane, not her actual name. Jane started working for the theater 2 months before me. They worked elsewhere as a supervisor and were looking to move up at the theater. Right after I started, one of the managers left to work at a different theater and the supervisor moved up. We had two managers, one general manager, basically the highest level at the theater, and a supervisor, which is a manager in training. This is important. Jane somehow got the supervisor position, even though there was another person who was essentially promised the position due to their continued service at the theater for almost 8 years. There were rumors about Jane hooking up with the GM when she started, and this situation got them going again. I didn't care too much because why would I? I am but a lowly peon in the corporate machine. Anyways, Jane moved up and the tenured crew member left the company because they got done over. Once Jane moved up, we had a whole meeting about her moving up and how the theater focuses on professionalism and ensuring no favoritism was happening, specifically referencing how normal crew members shouldn't fraternize outside of work with management. Jane didn't really listen to that though. She continued to hang out with the younger crew members and would do various things like go drinking with them, take them to bars, etc. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Jane had a secret Instagram where they would post pictures of themselves with their friends from the theater. They chose Instagram because none of their family or her boyfriend used Instagram and no one would know, right? Even more crazy was her relationship with a 19-year-old that worked at the theater. She had a boyfriend who had been with her for years and honestly supported her for all intents and purposes. Not only did she have a 19-year-old side piece, but also another one who was 17. I even caught them messing around in the break room one time. She essentially threatened me with my job if I told anyone. Honestly, she could have just told me to please be quiet and I would have just judged her silently. Fast forward about a year or so, and another one of the managers left for a new job. Jane obviously moved up and someone else took the supervisor position. Now, I won't go into too much detail, but despite my tenure and performance, I was looked over for the promotion. A newer crew member who was really good friends with Jane got the position over me. This was confirmed by the other manager who let me know that Jane was definitely in good with the GM, who ultimately made the final decision. That being said, I was beginning to sour and making minimum wage for years at a job that couldn't give a crap about my efforts and continued performance. That being said, I was preparing for an exit. Before I get into my exit, it is important to note that Jane had, and most likely still has a problem with me. I've talked about some issues that I had with her, but I never escalated or even confronted her about anything she did to me up until this point. I honestly let it be. But I didn't like her, and the fact I didn't like her or play along with her BS infuriated her. So much to the point where she made my life heck at the theater. When she was a supervisor, she didn't have much power, but when she became my manager, she began giving me crappy shifts, convincing people that I was weird and to avoid me. I mean, I am weird, but not like avoid me weird. Threatening me, my job. Her and her gang of misfit jerks also slashed my tires. I have no solid proof, but my car was parked in the employee lot, and you know, only employees can get in. Beyond that, she also made fun of my girlfriend, my now wife, for having an invisible illness, MS. She would make her life heck because she had a disability and had some minor limitations. Add together all of this, plus my girlfriend went off to college, plus getting looked over for the promotion, suffice it to say, I found a new job. I had a few close friends at the theater, including my now wife, who I met while working there. Silver lining, right? I had let a few of them know about this new job, but told them to keep it on the DL since it was still 2 weeks away. I had put my 2 weeks in with the GM and asked that he also keep it on the DL since Jane and her posse would mess with me. I told them that I wanted to tell everyone myself, so to please keep it quiet. Now, the important thing about my new job is that it essentially paid me double my wages from the theater. All of my friends were stoked for me. I was taking a job that would also have me making more than the managers at the theater, but also a job that puts me on a better track in life. That being said, with Jane and I butting heads on multiple occasions and her track record of messing with me, she decided to get one last attack on me. She started a rumor that I was just going to call out on all my shifts the 2 weeks before my new job started. With her last act of revenge in motion, the GM approached me and let me know that he wouldn't be scheduling me the last 2 weeks. I tried to explain to him that the rumors were BS, that I needed to work because it would be my only source of income. I told him that Jane started the rumor, and I started to tell him all of the other stuff as well. He, of course, didn't believe me and told me that Jane wouldn't do what I was saying she would do. So it was her word versus mine. I contacted my new job, who let me know that my start date was firm and that their budget wouldn't allow me to start until 2 weeks later as originally planned. Now here I am essentially jobless for 2 weeks. Now I was upset, but I was also lucky. I was still living with my family and didn't have to pay rent, so I sucked it up and essentially told myself that I would just take a forced 2-week vacation. But Jane didn't stop there. She escalated again by having one of her cronies call my new job and tell them that I got fired. I was luckily able to talk down my new boss by letting him know that this wasn't the case, that I put my 2 weeks in and everything else, but that was the last straw. I left my last day at the theater, and while it was sad and I was upset that I wouldn't be able to work out the last 2 weeks of my job that I had for years, I was focused and determined on revenge. Rule number 1 of living a secret life and having a secret Instagram is not to add everybody and their mother to the page. I had a friend of a friend who also didn't care for Jane. Let's call them Joe. Joe and I had gone to high school together and briefly worked at the theater together. He and Jane were part of the same group at the theater until they had a small falling out. Nothing crazy, but he wasn't exactly happy with her. I talked to Joe and we discussed my issues with Jane over some lunch that I bought him. Food is the key to all revenge plots. Once we ate and we discussed my problems with Jane, I asked for his help. I needed access to her Instagram. You know, the secret one, showing her hanging out with the young employees, them drinking and smoking together, and also some mushy posts about her 19-year-old boyfriend, as well as some with her 17-year-old fling. With very little discussion, he gave me full access. I took screenshots of essentially everything. We're talking 2 to 3 years worth of illegal activity. More than enough to get her fired and to raise some questions in her relationship. I took the screenshots and I printed them on the most high-quality paper/material that CVS had to offer. I also copied them to a few flash drives for good measure. I purchased 2 yellow padded envelopes, can never be too safe, and I filled them both with copies of all of the posts as well as a flash drive with additional copies. As well, I included a note in each for the appropriate parties. One of the envelopes was taped to the back door of the theater. There was somewhat of a blind spot, so I pulled into the parking lot from the rear and snuck around the corner Mission Impossible style to tape the envelope to the back door. On it was the GM's name. As well, in the letter, I merely stated that one of their managers had a secret Instagram with a lot of evidence of not only favoritism, but also fraternizing with employees, among other wrongdoings. In the letter, I also requested her immediate termination or the information would be provided to the district manager as well as our corporate office. I made sure to put it somewhere the GM would see it on his morning sweep when he opened the theater. The second folder and letter was delivered to her home by Joe. Joe agreed to this as I knew Jane's schedule and had a good idea of when she would be gone, and he knew where she lived from previous hangouts. With both folders delivered, it was only a matter of time. Before I knew it, I was receiving threats from Jane's gang, all of them saying that they knew it was me and that Jane was going to come after me, that she never did anything to deserve this. It didn't matter to me, of course. I no longer worked there and would hopefully never have to deal with them again. From what I heard, she was taken into the main office of the theater and the GM let her have it. He ultimately had to fire her because there was clear proof that she was in direct violation of many of the rules and conditions of her employment. As well, her boyfriend with proof in hand kicked her out of his home. Last I heard, she moved farther north, and hasn't held down a solid job since. Her family didn't want much to do with her once everything came out with her cheating on her boyfriend. In the end, I started my new job without fail and moved on from that place. Haven't seen much of anyone from there since. Have you ever had a boss that was doing things they shouldn't have been doing? If so, did you do anything about it? Please let us know. And give Jane my number. She sounds like my kind of gal. Cake lady accuses me of smashing her cake twice. At 16 years old, in 1994, I got a job as a bagger in a popular grocery chain that shall remain unnamed. It's irrelevant anyway. I quickly became everyone's favorite bagger around the store, mostly because I actually did my job properly, instead of messing around like most of my juvenile coworkers. I even had regulars who would deliberately get in line in whichever lane I was stationed at, despite the wait, because they knew I'd bag their stuff properly. Honestly, it was a lot of fun, most of the time. But this wouldn't be much of a story if I were reminiscing about the good times, would it? One evening, here comes this cake lady with a gigantic sheet cake that barely fit into the cart and a 50-pound bag of dog food. That's it, nothing else. She was an older lady, probably in her 60s, tiny and seemingly frail. But she managed to get her cake, special order from the deli/bakery, custom decorated, and her dog food onto the bill with minimal difficulty. The cashier scanned her 2 items, cake lady paid, and I was just starting to get them back into her cart when an ear-splitting bellow shattered the relative peace of the entire front end. Cast. We've got cake lady, we've got cashier, we've got general manager, and me. Cake lady. No! I stopped, frozen in place, my hands reaching for the cake to place it gently back into her cart, unsure of how to proceed. Cashier. Ma'am? Cake lady. I don't want him, gesturing towards me in a somehow condescending way, even touching my cake. The last time I was here, he completely ruined it. Keep in mind that although this was a big grocery store, it was a small town. I knew the regulars, some even by name. I'd never even seen this woman before, and I certainly had never ruined anyone's cake. I'm overly conscientious, and if anything like that had ever happened, I would have reported it myself immediately. As I said, I also took my job very seriously. Cashier. Him? Are you sure? She knew me and my reputation in the store. Cake lady. Yes! She actually said it like that, hissing with exaggeration like a snake from a Floridian cartoon. He destroyed the last cake I bought, and I won't have him touching this one. She refused any other assistance and insisted on placing her items back into her cart personally. Mind you, she had already paid. So in goes the cake, flat on the bottom of her cart, not the lower rack, just the basket part, and she puts the gigantic bag of dog food standing straight up at the front end of the cart. Me. Ma'am? Still trying to help and avert what I see as an oncoming catastrophe. Cake lady. Shut up! I know what I'm doing! She took 2 steps, and of course, the bag of dog food came crashing down on her precious cake, completely destroying it. Crazy lady. Ah! And without another word, she shoved her cart into the wall, hard enough to chip off a chunk of the cinder block. That was one strong old lady, and walked right out of the store without even taking the dog food, let alone the smashed cake, never to be heard from again. Or so I thought. About a week later, I got called into the general manager's office. This was odd because normally any complaints about employees would be handled by supervisors or department managers. This was the big boss, so I naturally got scared. I was thinking that I was either about to get fired or promoted. It was that serious. I don't recall the conversation verbatim, but it went something like this. General manager. We've had a complaint so serious that I'm handling it myself. This is the complaint. He proceeded to lay out Cake Lady's complaint, which I immediately recognized from the aforementioned incident. Only, it's full of lies. She had told him that I had deliberately and maliciously destroyed her cake, not only once, but twice. She had threatened to sue, wanted me fired, etc. And unbeknownst to me, she'd been back in the store that week and had pointed me out to him. Me, utterly flabbergasted, but sure as heck not caving. Sir? You can ask anyone, either my coworkers or the customers, and they'll tell you I would never do anything like that. Matter of fact, please ask the cashier who checked out that lady. Better yet, check the security footage. 1994, as I said, but this was a brand new store with all the bells and whistles they could throw at it. GM. Alright, we'll do that. Get back to work. He was actually an awesome boss who supported his employees. It'll be a factor if I post about this job again. And with that, I was dismissed. Back to my menial duties. footage reviewed, customer banned permanently, and I went on about my job. Not much later to be promoted to cashier, and then FES, front-end supervisor, with many more stories to relate. Thankfully, I never saw that lady again. Speaking of cake, what's your favorite flavor cake of all time? Please let us know.
Carrot cake. Golden Corral for the win.
I have to meet with the area manager to explain why I missed a target? Sure thing. To set the scene, I used to work for a phone network in the UK in the late 90s as a shop salesman. The company had a problem with declining sales as they thought themselves better than others, and people would pay the privilege of being with them. Well, the public didn't, and it showed. Of course, head office couldn't comprehend this, and along with a string of draconian measures, they insisted that if you missed any of your 21 key targets each month, you had to travel to wherever your area manager was and explain in person why you failed and how you will correct this for next month. And if you didn't, they started disciplinary proceedings. I and a lot of other staff realized this colossal mistake they made in the wording. First off, we could choose when to travel to them, and the company had to, by law, pay for it. They even said that they would pay travel and other expenses in the announcement and linked to the government website stating it. Cue the maliciousness. I had actually taken a new role in a different industry and was on my 3-month notice. And this new policy came into effect in the first of the 3 months, and I missed one of my targets, for amount of accessories sold, by 2%, so I got the summons to see the area manager. I had been informed that there was a meeting of area managers to be held in Aberdeen, the far north of Scotland, in 2 weeks, so scheduled my meeting with him accordingly. Now, I lived and worked near the other end of the country, so I used the company system to book my travel, and due to the journey times, 9 hours to get there, I had to book a hotel for 2 nights. I also opted to pay the optional £50 to upgrade all of my bookings, first-class rail ticket, and a 4-star hotel instead of a welcome break or other budget option. So on the Monday I traveled up, stayed overnight, Tuesday held my 15 meeting, which went like this. Area manager: so, why are you here? Me: I missed my target for sales of accessories by 2%. Manager: and how do you plan to correct this so we don't have to start a formal disciplinary? Me: I don't. Manager: I beg your pardon? Me: I have no intention of making a huge effort to sell 4 pounds more stuff. I officially leave the company in 3 weeks' time. Manager, turning red with anger: what the heck are you doing here then? Why have you even bothered? Me: well, you see, I need a good reference, so I'm following all the rules. I'll end it here, but you get the image. I also showed him how much they paid to send me up there. Train tickets, first class both way, close to 800 pounds, and hotel was around 400 for 2 nights. Remember, I used the optional upgrade system and paid £50 in total for the upgrades on the system, so they've spent close to £1,150 to send me most of the way up the country to tell the manager I was leaving. Oh, and they also paid me for 3 full days' work to attend this meeting. Again, as they said it was on company time, so we got paid. Due to the location, I would need to travel up Monday, attend the meeting on Tuesday afternoon, his only free slot, and then get the train Wednesday back home. I also know from speaking to other friends I worked with that they also did similar tricks, and it basically cost them tens of thousands of pounds to send staff here and there and everywhere to these meetings. It also caused a huge turnover in staff who had just had enough with all the garbage. I heard around 3 months after I left, they stopped doing this as the cost was astronomical, plus the amount of staff downtime was also astronomical. The company has slowly learned their lesson, mainly through replacing most of the top brass with people who have a clear idea of what they're doing. But yeah, that was the best trip I ever had to Scotland. Edit: to counter one person's comment of it being a jerk move, the area manager only the week before our meeting was interviewing for my replacement with my store manager. The area manager and store manager had to approve it. I was also not the only member of staff doing this. $127 dine-in dash. So I'm a server, and one of my tables walked out. This is gonna be long, but please read, I need advice. Background: the servers are supposed to pay for walkouts when they happen where I work. I've had to pay for things in the past because I messed up, and I admit they were my fault. I've worked there for 2 years now, so I'm well aware of the rule. Story time. It's getting close to the end of the night, and I had to use the bathroom. Had to go number 2, which means I was gonna be gone for a little. I say to 2 of my fellow servers, I have to use the bathroom. Can you guys please watch table F1? And they say okay. So I go to the bathroom and come back a little bit later. The assistant manager let me know I had a table. Another server got the table's drink order for me So I'm just waiting as the assistant manager makes the drinks, and my general manager comes up to me and says F1 haven't been paid for. I notice the two people from the table are gone. Before I went to the bathroom, the table asked for their check, so I go to see if they left the money, but it was empty. Me: there's no money. GM: well, you have to pay for it. Me: I don't think I should have to pay for this because I asked 2 other servers to watch my table. GM: you signed the paper, so you have to pay. You know the rules. Me: I'm sorry, but I'm not paying for it. This wasn't my fault. I walk away so I can continue to take care of my other table. Then maybe 15 minutes later, I pull my assistant manager to the side. Me: look, I follow the rules. You guys, my managers, have always said if you step out, let someone know so they can watch your table, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm not paying for it. Assistant manager: well, that's not fair to everyone else, and you signed the paper. Me: GM said that too, and I don't know what paper you're talking about. Assistant manager: the paper that says you have to pay for walkouts regardless of the reason. It was passed out a while ago. Me: I never signed that because I was never given one. Well, it has to be paid for. It was your table at the end of the day. It's your responsibility. Me: I was having a human bodily function. How can I be held responsible when I let others know? Well, you didn't tell me, but we can't put you on the schedule until it's paid for. Me: well, this might be the last time we work together because I'm not paying for it. In the end, my GM gave me a speech about how I've been working there for 2 years and that I'm a good employee and I should get more trustworthy people to watch my tables. Secretly, he took some of the money off the order and told me not to tell the other servers, but I still have to pay $100 overtime like a payment plan. I just want to know if I was in the wrong for not wanting to pay it. Obviously, the other 2 servers could have been held accountable as well, but I didn't want to have my coworkers hate me. At this point, I'm just going to pay it off and work until I find a new job, because this place is far from perfect, but this whole thing has completely upset me. Well, who do you agree with? OP or their boss? Please let us know.
I think we need to get some bro revenge on that boss.
You say I can't go out for lunch? Yes, I can. This happened when I was 15 years old. From 15 to 18, I lived in a state institution. Think Oliver Twist, but slightly less dirty, and we actually got food. The institution was a pretty long ways from where I lived before, so I had to change schools. At this point, I hadn't really been to school in years and got held back a few times, 3 times to be exact, so I was way older than my classmates. It only took me 1 day to realize that I'd rather spend my 30 minutes lunch break outside school than inside. Nothing to do with the people, I just preferred to be alone and relax. The school was right next to a canal, and I spent most of my lunch breaks on a little pier, enjoying the water and feeding the ducks who'd come to check me out. This worked out pretty great until some teacher asked me for my pass. I knew I had to have one, but I kind of avoided showing it by just walking in like I had done nothing wrong. The fact that I looked older must have helped too. The reason that I didn't have a pass was that you weren't allowed one just for chilling outside. You only got one if you actually went to your grandparents' house and ate something there. So I got in trouble for not having a pass. But I got in trouble for a lot of things, and nothing really scared me anymore. I tried to keep a low profile, but I did feel like I needed the time alone during the lunch break. So I got caught a few times in the following weeks and needed to go to the principal, who hammered on me for going out without a pass. I told him I didn't know about the pass. Lie. But surely I could get one, since I fulfilled all the requirements for getting one. I told him I went to my institution for lunch every day. Lie. So please hand me my pass. Now, he was aware where I had come from, the institution, and that it was quite far away from the school. He told me there was no way I went there to eat every day. I told him yes, so he got out the necessary paperwork, a form that a parent/caretaker had to fill in to say that I'd be eating there every day. He told me that lunch would start in about 5 minutes, and then he expected the signed paperwork on his desk before lunch was over. If I could do that, I'd get the pass. If I'd failed, he'd go down hard on me for every infraction that would follow. So I did what I had to do. Once the bell rang, I spurted to my bike and pedaled the 5K, 3 miles, like there was no tomorrow. I barged into the institution's place, where they were all very surprised to see me, and grabbed a piece of bread and some cheese. Stuffing these into my mouth, I then disturbed a meeting with the director of the institution and told him that he needed to sign this to prove that I would eat there every day. And I told him I had eaten just now, still chewing the bread and cheese. Now, thank God the director was a cool, laid-back guy, also very smart, so he knew what I was up to. He signed it, and I flew out the door again, onto my bike, and did the 5K back. I ran up the stairs and got the paper down onto the desk of the principal within literally seconds to spare before the bell rang. I just stood there, panting and sweating like an ogre, while the principal looked at the paper. He asked me if I had a nice lunch. Yeah, pretty chill, I managed to tell him, between breathing my lungs out. I got my pass and I sat at that pier for the rest of the school year, enjoying some peace and quiet and friendly ducks. I also failed that year and transferred again, but I did come out okay, thank God. University finally treated me like an adult, and most if not all of my behavioral problems just went away. At least I didn't have to jump through so many hoops just to eat some food on my own. Being told to shut up and what happened after. So this was a few years ago, when I was still a cashier at a certain blue-themed department store. We offered a no taxes discount on applicable items to those with a native status card, and to apply this, they needed to present the card at the beginning of the order. We would check it for validity, and the order would begin. Well, one fated day, a couple comes through, maybe mid to late 30s, and they have a medium-sized order, which I process with no problems. No indication of what is to come until I tell them their total. The man says they have a status card, and I tell him that unfortunately, they would have needed to declare it at the beginning of the order for me to apply the discount. The woman starts insisting that we can do it for her, that we've done it before, etc. So I call the CSM, Customer Service Manager, equivalent of a front-end supervisor, over, explain the situation, and ask if there's anything we can do. I still want to help the customer at this point, even if she's being a little rude. The CSM explains that short of erasing the order and scanning it in again, this time with the discount in place, there's nothing to be done. This lady chooses that, and while the CSM is erasing the order, I say in an apologetic tone, "Sorry, this is why we need to have you show us the card at the beginning of the order," by which I meant that it would take even longer for them to be able to leave. Admittedly, this was not the best thing I could have said at the time, but she snapped at me. Not an exact quote, but the gist of what she actually said. "I knew that you could do it, so don't be stupid." I said something else. I think something to the effect of, "Please don't call me that, ma'am," to which she replied even more venomously, and although I don't remember the first part of her sentence, I could never forget the second part. "Maybe it's time for you to shut up." I had never been told to shut up by a customer before. I'd had my fair share of rude customers before, to be sure, and even been sworn at and had my intelligence insulted. But for some reason, being told to shut up like that was the tipping point, because I did shut up. And after they were gone, the man whose order was next asked if I was alright, and all I could do was ask another CSM if I could go to the bathroom, where I promptly burst into tears. When I came out, obviously still quite upset but not crying anymore, the front-end manager told me to take my lunch early. When I came back is when this story takes a turn. Apparently, the manager and yet another CSM had been standing at the front doors, watching for this couple to drive by. And when they saw them, the front-end manager actually ran after their car, and when he managed to stop them, went off on them about how they had treated me and proceeded to ban them from the store. I hadn't particularly gotten along with my manager before then. He's harmless, just very outgoing and slightly odd personality. But this incident instilled me with a newfound respect for him and a stiffer upper lip around customers. Dispatcher refuses to send van in for maintenance, gets forced to change my tire while I enjoy dinner on company time. This story is one of how a lowly delivery driver got to royally irk a dispatcher, waste his time, get 4 hours of overtime, meal paid for, and a free beer. So I was a driver for a little company that rhymes with Slamazon. I had been there for several months by this point and had developed a reputation of being very serious about vehicle maintenance. We aren't talking like washing them or whatnot, but cleaning out urine bottles, fixing broken wiper blades, installing lights to replace the burnt out ones, or other stuff that would indicate you actually remotely care for your driver's well-being. Seriously guys, I had a van once with no working lights of any kind, and its passenger side door fell off its hinges right in front of my dispatchers, and they still sent me out. Needless to say, some trips were better than others, but this particular time, well, it was a doozy. You see, friends, I was considered a problem driver by some for being obsessed with vehicles being kept road legal. I had not caused any issues other than this. We had dispatchers that were promoted up after a month, and after hitting mailboxes, cars, and other kinds of insanity, but I was always skipped over. This naturally irked me to no end, and I was looking for better within 6 months of starting. I was there for nearly 2 years. Naturally, all my requests for the essential equipment and urine bottle removal was denied. So I'd buy bulbs for my van and pull them out after my route was done so I could put them into the next one the next day, and I chucked the bottles out on the record. Kinda gross, but better than smelling it in the hot Georgia sun in the middle of summer in a van with sometimes working AC. This nonsense continued for the entirety of my time there, of course. This event, however, was the first of many times I decided to get back at the dispatchers for messing with my routes and giving me the worst vans and so on. You see, this van had the lights that were bad, broken AC, shook like crazy, squeaked, smelled gross, door didn't properly lock, so anybody could have stolen packages from it and not much could be done. And to top all of this off, 4 bad tires, like metal bands exposed and one bulging out. The whole day, I babied this van as best I could, putting air in the tire a few times and just barely finishing my route with some daylight to spare. So, 10 hours on the road down and an hour and a half back to the distribution center. I get underway and get about halfway before I felt the telltale shake of a tire going out. Well, here we go, I say to myself and scan my surroundings. I'm on the interstate and not very far from an off-ramp. So, with what little tire I have, I limp off the ramp and go to a parking lot, which is right next to an Applebee's. Perfect luck, all things considered. I call dispatch and give my exact location and tell them what happened. The conversation goes as thus. We've got me, Chuck It Bucket 007, and we've got the dispatcher, the jerk. Me. Hey, I got a flat over here at my location. Dispatcher. What? How? Me. Because you sent me out in a van that needed tires. Dispatcher. Fine. Whatever. Everyone has gone home, so you're gonna have to wait till I get there. Me. Sure, that's fine. I'll stay clocked in then. Dispatcher. You finished your route, so I don't see why you would be on the clock. Me. Because I am still in command of this vehicle, I have the keys, and if you want me to give it back, you are going to keep me on the clock. I had called the company HR and explained everything before I called dispatcher, and they ensured me that my time would be recorded. Dispatcher. Fine. I have things to do tonight, so we gotta hurry up. Perfect. Time to mess with this guy. After giving him extremely vague directions while I enjoy a steak meal and a large beer on the clock and no hoots given anymore, he finally finds it. I go out there and see that he has brought the smallest, saddest, most not usable for the task jack in the center. Me. Well, get to it. You made me leave with this van and you can change the tire. Dispatcher. Nuh-uh. You were driving it, and I interject. Me. Drivers are not allowed by company policy to perform repairs to the van. He had yelled at me previously for doing this with the bulbs. Only dispatch, management, maintenance, and the repair shop can repair the van. So I walk away to finish my meal while he tries to fix this flat with a jack barely able to lift the front of the vehicle and needed bricks and other items to even go high enough. In total, I wasted 4 hours of his time, cost him time to smoke up, and he missed the game that he apparently had money on. I got my meal effectively for free with the hefty overtime I got that week. As an extra smackdown, corporate came in and fired the manager, assistant manager, and this particular dispatcher for failure to maintain their vehicles to DOT standards and for mismanaging the DSP, delivery service provider, after my lovely chat with HR during the incident. I showed them the text messages and some of the recorded audio I had taken of dispatcher being a general jerk. A week later, and we had a temp management comprised of corporate operations that would oversee the vans getting replaced with less crappy ones, training new management, and of course, giving training on what to do if you have a vehicle fail like that, and granting drivers some maintenance permissions. Karen tries to bully me into giving her brat candy. I accidentally shatter her marriage. Okay, so I'm a frequent cruiser of this subreddit, but I never thought I'd actually have my own story to tell on it. I'm still not completely convinced if this wasn't a fever dream. If not for a neighbor dropping by to ask me what the heck happened last night, I probably would have dismissed it as a fever dream. But enough preface, let's get into it. So I was hoping, thanks to everything going on this year, that this wouldn't be a problem, but the kids in my neighborhood keep coming to my door on Halloween for candy. Every year, I tell them that no, I'm not giving it out and to go somewhere else. I've gone so far as to put out signs telling them to buzz off and leave me alone every October. But the little jerks just seem to take it as a challenge. They'll repeatedly ring the doorbell until I come out or get bored. Once they went 5 whole minutes before they went away. or keep coming back to my place after I tell them no, hoping I'll change my mind. I never do. This year, one particularly persistent little brat from the next cul-de-sac over, who's made it her mission to wear me down for candy every year, rings the doorbell, and I tell her nicely, or as nicely as you can tell someone who repeatedly ignores the big red sign saying that my house is not for trick-or-treating, that I don't have any candy. She looks at me with what she probably thought were adorable puppy dog eyes and asks me if I would mind checking. I tell her no, there's absolutely no candy in my house, nor will there ever be. That was a lie, but she didn't know that. Then the little monster gets it into her head that I'm lying and keeps asking me if I'm sure. I tell her that I'm diabetic. I'm not, but she apparently doesn't know what that means. One Google search on my phone later and she accuses me of lying about having it. I am, but that's not the point. I suppose I could have just given her a Hershey bar, but I really didn't want her spreading the triumphant news to all the other little monsters of how she finally got the mean lady to succumb to her will at the risk of any of them following in her example. So I just tell her that I don't have to give candy to anybody who's going to be so rude as to deny my very serious medical condition and close the door. About an hour later, I'm hate watching the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula movie. It's a train wreck, but I can't help watching it. When I get another ring on the doorbell, I come down to find this little abomination peeking out from behind the legs of a very angry-looking entitled mom. The following exchange goes down. Me: how can I help you, ma'am? Entitled mom:
My daughter says you repeatedly refuse to give her candy.
Me: I'm sorry, I don't have any. Entitled mom:
This callous attitude towards the festivities is unacceptable. It's Halloween. You should have prepared for it.
Me: I didn't think any kids would be trick-or-treating this year, thanks to everything going on. Entitled mom:
Well, after everything they've been through, we as a community owe it to them to make up for all the fun they've missed out on this year.
Me: Look, I get where you're coming from, but it's 10 p.m. I'm not going to get up to go get a bag of Tootsie Rolls at this ungodly hour just so that your kid can have the full Halloween experience. It's here that Mommy Dearest takes it upon herself to give me a lecture on the importance of participating in the community. I told her that maybe if she wasn't such an entitled Karen, her husband would be more eager to hook up with her instead of me. This is where I may have been kind of the jerk. What I said was nothing more than a heat-of-the-moment remark, but the woman went absolutely ballistic upon hearing it. She freaked out and started screaming about whether or not her husband had been with me. Apparently, the guy actually did go on some kind of a business trip recently, and my little quip set off all the red flags in her head. She starts demanding to know if her hubby was in my house, trying to crane her neck around me to see inside and shrieking at him to come out. At this point, I'm tired. I'm on the verge of a food coma from all the grocery store goodies I've binged on, and I'm 100% done with all of this. So I tell her to come back with a warrant and shut the door on her in spite of her attempts to wedge her way in. I can still hear her meltdown on my way up the stairs, now joined in disharmony with her daughter demanding to know what's going on. I look out the window of my bedroom to see her angrily punching in a number on her phone and dialing up who I think was her husband. The poor man got an earful. I didn't catch everything she said, but at one point she mentioned something about how he has no business cheating when she could have taken advantage of his absence with her brother-in-law after he came on to her at their anniversary party, but she spared his feelings by not doing anything about it. She's being so loud that she draws the attention of other trick-or-treating families in the neighborhood. Anybody unfortunate enough to ask what's going on gets treated to a first-hand spun bite of her marital problems. One neighbor goes so far as to come out of his house and ask her to take this someplace where she isn't disrupting the ambience. This prompts her to turn her wrath on him and shrieks at him to mind his own beeswax. The poor man barely gets away with his life. It was like watching an episode of Maury unfolding, if Maury was an elderly Asian man. At this point, I was seriously scared that she was going to try and break into my house, looking for proof that her hubby was there. I considered just coming out and admitting to her that I was yanking her chain, but the ball was already in motion and I doubted whether my confession would save her marriage at this point. Fortunately, after she ended the call, she stormed off with her now hysterical goblin in tears. I felt a little bad for turning what should have been a fun night for the kid into such a horrible experience, but maybe now she'll know not to knock on my door next year. Speaking of Halloween, did you eat any candy this year for Halloween? And if so, what kind? Please let us know.
Almond Snickers for the win.
Mother steps in front of my 60-mile-per-hour car with a flashlight. This just happened, and I really need to vent. My store manager is giving me time to cool down as I'm really shaken up. I'm a delivery driver for a pizza place, and I get an order. I put it into Google and drive to basically the back alley ghetto of a neighborhood. I'm next to a house with tons of old washing machines and restaurant equipment. I call the person, as the delivery instructions told me I should, and the mother picks up. Entitled Mom.
Hello?
Me. Hello, ma'am. This is OP calling from Papa John's. I think I'm here.
I don't see you. Are you sure you're here?
Me. Thinking I just got the wrong house. I'm sorry. Here, let me drive up the road a bit.
I think I see you.
I live in North Carolina, so trees are everywhere. I end up driving around for 20 minutes and feeling horrible. The mother is getting aggravated as she realizes the person she saw wasn't me. I keep telling her I put in the address, but Google says I'm right where she is. She asks if I'm in a trailer park, which I wasn't. She then put her 14-year-old son on the phone. Entitled Son.
Hey, are you stupid or something? Come to…
Then he read the name of his trailer park, letter by letter, slowly. I put the name into GPS and find that it's 10 minutes away. Darn it, Google. I tell them, and the kid gives the phone back to his mother. Entitled Mom.
This is unbelievable. I've been waiting for an hour now.
20 minutes. Me. I'm on my way. I'm so sorry. I hang up and go to the trailer park. I get there and call her for her number. No answer. I call again. No answer. I call my store, who tells me to take the second order. I had 2 people's orders with me and to just come back. I take the second order, and on my way back to the store, Entitled Mom is standing in the middle of the road and shines a flashlight into my eyes. I slam on my brakes and nearly hit her. She calls me names several times and screams at me saying,
"You never called,"
which I did. I ended up crying, and the whole situation triggered a panic/anxiety attack. The entitled son takes the food and snorts, saying,
"I worked in delivery. It isn't that hard."
Entitled Mom.
I think giving stickers at Walmart is more your speed, jerk. Now get the heck off my property.
I drove back to the store in tears. I'm about to go back to work. Venting this out here has made me feel better. Edit. Wow, I wasn't expecting so many comments. Thank you to everyone for your support. I'm fine now. It just shook me up. Speaking of pizza, what's your favorite place to get pizza from? Please let us know. I could go for some Pizza Hut right now. Homeowners Association doesn't care about my health, but how dare my flat look nonconformist. This happened 5 years ago. First, a bit about me. For the story's sake, you can call me Alex. I was a 29-year-old male at the time. I'm generally very friendly and accommodating and try to avoid confrontation where possible and always try to do things in a peaceful and patient manner. Now, onto the backstory. I lived in a gated community comprised entirely of multiple blocks of small apartments. Every block of apartments looked exactly the same as the other blocks of apartments around it. They were a few floors high, and I lived on the first floor. Clarification, I believe in America the first floor is the ground floor. Where I live, the ground floor is the ground floor, and the first floor is the one above the ground floor, or as an American would call it, the second floor. So I lived one floor above the ground floor. The Homeowners Association/estate management were extremely strict about any infringements regarding things we weren't allowed to do and would issue fines very quickly if you were in breach of the rules and didn't rectify it. For example, you were allowed to have furniture on your patio, but you weren't allowed to have any decor on your patio. I imagine it was because they wanted uniformity in the appearance of the blocks of flats. Also, no loud noise or music was allowed after 10 p.m. I personally agreed with the no loud noise thing. It was a quiet and peaceful community that frankly was well managed, which is something I enjoyed about it. I didn't agree so much with the no decor thing. As a photographer and artist, personal expression is important to me, but I figured as long as I kept it tasteful and stylish and mostly out of visible sight, they hopefully wouldn't have an issue with it. I'm a big fan of vintage motorbikes and had a few tasteful, or at least I thought they were tasteful, metal posters with classic bikes like Triumph Bonnevilles, Indian Scouts, BSAs, Nortons, etc. up on one of the walls of my patio. They were at such an angle that meant they weren't easily visible from the rest of the complex, so I didn't think it would be an issue. Somehow, it was still spotted by the estate manager, but more on this later. I also had a few plants on the ledge of my balcony. Again, we'll get to that later. You need to know about it for the rest of the story. My downstairs neighbor also used to smoke in her back garden. The ground floors had small gardens, and my balcony was directly above her garden. Her smoke would rise up and go through my open bedroom window, or at the large sliding door on my patio, which was usually open in summer, and enter my flat. Since I don't smoke, this bothered me. The smell seeped into my furniture and bedding. Even my sleeping pillow smelled of smoke. I politely spoke to her in person about it, and she apologized for the inconvenience but never stopped doing it. She was actually a very friendly lady. She was never horrible. I suppose she was nice enough to be friendly, but not nice enough to stop doing it. So I decided to take it a step further, and I emailed the manager of the gated community to ask if there was something that could be done. The following is the email transaction between myself and the manager, who I'll call Nicole. Good day. I stay in Unit 117 on the first floor, and my downstairs neighbor, who lives on the ground floor, although being a very friendly old lady, has a nasty habit of smoking in her patio. My issue is that in summer with the heat, I leave my bedroom window and sliding door open to keep my flat cool, and the fumes from her cigarettes are constantly rising up and entering my apartment. I'm not a smoker, so this bothers me. My flat smells as if a smoker lives here. Now, my question is, are there any rules or laws that say she can't smoke in her patio due to her smoke entering my flat? She knows her smoke bothers me and has apologized to me for it, but hasn't done anything about it. If she were to only smoke inside her flat or outside her front door, I'm sure the smoke wouldn't come into my flat nearly as much since I never have my front door open. Thanks in advance. Regards, Alex. She responded with, Good morning, Alex. This is a very contentious issue, as this is her home and there is no law at the moment stating you cannot smoke in your home. Regards, Nicole. I wasn't happy with that response, but I figured there was nothing more I could do about it and didn't want to bother making a bigger issue of it, so I just forgot about it and moved on. Until about a year later, when estate management picked up on 2 infringements by me. At this point, Nicole had resigned and Stuart had replaced her. This is the email I got from Stuart. Good day. I trust that you are well. Please, could you remove the pots from the wall as per the attached photo, as this is dangerous should they be knocked off and fall onto someone downstairs and in breach of the conduct rules. Furthermore, no items can be attached to the walls in the patio, and you are requested to remove the pictures as per the photo, as this is aesthetically displeasing. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Stuart, Estate Manager. After that email, I was now a bit upset and determined to get my way in terms of my smoking downstairs neighbor. Cue my malicious compliance. Good day, Stuart. I'm very well, thanks for asking. Absolutely, I will take the pictures down, not a problem. We wouldn't want someone's vision to be irreparably damaged from the unsightly trauma that is my vintage bike picture collection. Though I must comment that I appreciate the very polite way my decor is described as aesthetically displeasing, as opposed to what that actually means. Dang, that's ugly, is probably a more colloquial translation. My feelings might have been hurt otherwise. I'm very relieved I didn't go into the profession of interior decorating, which a few people I know have said I should have done, since the sudden realization that my taste and style isn't what I once thought it was. It could have been a disaster career-wise. Alternatively, what if I were to replace the photos of the bikes with a nice family portrait of my parents? Granted, they aren't supermodels, but they're attractive to me, though I may be biased in that opinion since I care for them, so I'm hoping they're not too ugly. Oops, I mean aesthetically displeasing. If that fails, maybe a reproduction of the Mona Lisa would be sufficient to meet your high standards. Tourists travel across the globe and wait in line for hours just to see it for a few minutes. Would that be allowed? I won't even charge fellow tenants for looking at it when they're walking past my balcony. Obviously, I'm being a little ridiculous, and I don't mean to give you a hard time. You're just doing your job and enforcing some of the ridiculous rules that management has come up with, like the freedom of choice to decorate and style our own property in a manner that we like. God forbid we show some individuality. Now that I think about it, the endless rows of identical-looking Soviet-era housing structures do have a nice seizure-inducing repetitive nature about them. While we're on the subject of decor, how is it that plastic patio furniture is still allowed? Yes, it is patio furniture, which complex rules say are allowed on patios, but dang, that is painful to look at. You know what I mean, right? That cheap white plastic stuff one buys at the furniture section at those large bulk buying stores. I find it very aesthetically displeased. Oh, forget it. It's ugly. I don't like looking at it. It comes across as tacky. Can't they be scrapped as well? I'm going off topic again. The whole point of me bringing up all this stuff is that a few months ago I emailed asking about a complaint I had. The complaint was that the lady who lives directly downstairs from me regularly smokes in her garden, and me, being the lover of oxygen that I am, keep my windows and patio door open for fresh air. and her smoke is constantly wafting into my apartment. Me being a non-smoker, I get quite annoyed. I asked if anything could be done about this. I was told it's her property and her patio. She can smoke on it if she wants to. I know that health legislation stipulates that smoking within a certain distance from a designated non-smoking area is illegal. If it's good enough for public spaces, shouldn't I have that same right in my own house? Granted, I don't have designated non-smoking area signs in my flat, but I'm the only one who lives there, so I already know there's no smoking allowed. I made the rule. It would be silly to put them up inside. Should I put them up outside on my patio instead so others can see? Maybe they don't know I don't like cigarette smoke. Actually, wait, I already know the answer to that. They're aesthetically displeasing. Forget I mentioned it. So to recap, what really gripes me is that when my neighbor smokes so close to my flat that I can practically smell what brand of cigarettes she smokes, I'm told I can't do anything about it, even though it might affect my health because it's her property and she can do what she likes on it. By that logic, she could do crazy things on her lawn, and I couldn't do anything about it as long as she kept the volume down after 10 p.m. But I can't put up pictures on my patio because some people might not like the way they look, even though it is also my property, and it would be nice if I could do with it as I wanted, provided it wasn't an eyesore. Since I take a lot of pride in my flat, I wouldn't call it an eyesore as I maintain it quite well, or at least I think so. If only a person's lungs and health were as important as other people's inability to mind their own business. So what I really wanted to know is there any way that my neighbor could possibly just smoke inside her flat? Or at least outside the front of her flat if she insists on smoking outside where the smoke won't come into my place as easily. I would accept that too. I'm not a completely unreasonable guy. I find her smoke nasally displeasing. I normally wouldn't make such a big deal about it, but I'm starting to feel that what I'm subjected to versus what others have to be subjected to is a bit unfair. Sorry to put all of this on you, Stuart. I understand it's totally not your fault. I'll still take the pictures and the plants down immediately. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Alex, Unit 117. I sent that reply after 6 p.m. and did not expect him to respond until the next morning, but half an hour later, I got a reply. My email must have made an impact. Hi, Alex. Thank you for your email. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I do understand your frustration, and unfortunately, this is the reality of staying in such built-up complexes. I will address the issue of the smoking with your neighbor and will revert to you. Thank you for your assistance and understanding. Kind regards, Stuart. To me, that sounded positive, so Stuart deserved a pat on the back. I sent a short reply. Thanks, Stuart. Much appreciated. You're a top-notch guy. By now, it was after 8 p.m., and I'm sure with a 9-to-5 desk job, Stuart should have been at home and clocked out, but he was still replying to me. Hi, Alex. I have confirmed that smoking is only allowed inside the unit or at least 5 meters from a public place such as your balcony. I will confirm the neighbor's unit number in the morning unless you can advise offhand, and will address her on the smoking issue. Kind regards, Stuart. I was over the moon. I ran downstairs to see what her unit number was and ran back upstairs to reply. Stuart, you've gone from being a top-notch guy to being a legend. Thanks so much. Her unit is 107. I was worried the outcome wouldn't be great and would have to accidentally bump into my plants while taking my pictures down while she was conveniently smoking in just the right position. It would be a bad accident, of course. Sorry, some smoke got into my lungs, though that would be a lot of effort since I've already taken the plants and pictures down, and I would have had to put them all up again to make the story sound believable to the police because they would no doubt interrogate me. And that's frankly too much effort. Luckily, I don't have to resort to that. Thanks again, Stuart. Your hard work has kept me out of prison. It's late. You can email her in the morning. Go home and have a beer. You've earned it. P.S. In all seriousness though, I'm totally kidding about the plant thing, and if the lady downstairs were to peg it in the near future, it would be completely coincidental and nothing to do with me, and I'd appreciate if you forgot you ever spoke to me. This would be terrible evidence against me in court. I mean, I dislike smokers, but I wouldn't do this to them. I'm not crazy. Regards, Alex. Sadly, that was the last I would hear from Stuart. Our correspondence stopped after that. I felt we had developed a bond, and it ended as quickly as it had begun. I only lived in that estate for another 2 years and had no more issues with the downstairs neighbor or her cigarette smoke. I now live in the suburbs in a lovely house with my wife and have no downstairs neighbors to complain about and no Stuarts to tell me what I can and can't do. I will treasure our time together. I hope wherever he is, he has our email thread printed out and pinned on his office board above his desk and thinks of me fondly whenever he looks at it. Am I the jerk for not giving my food to my aunt? I'm 17, male. I really like cooking and I'm very good at it. I wish to become a professional chef when I grow up and have already written a cookbook. Everybody in my family knows this about me, and on several occasions I have made, with help from my sister, meals for family gatherings. That said, I do not like sharing my food. Once I take food onto my plate, I don't like anybody else eating from my plate. I love food and always make enough so that I will feel full. If other people are going to eat, I do make extra. However, I enjoy taking a full plate serving of my favorite dishes and like to finish it all. My parents know this, and so does my sister. Usually, nobody else asks me to share my food with them. Yesterday, my mother and aunt went out for dinner and I was home alone. I made some crock-pot spaghetti and meatballs and sat down to eat in front of the television. After 5 minutes, my mom and aunt came back home. I asked them how dinner was, and they said it was fine. My aunt saw me eating spaghetti and told me how mouth-watering my food is. I thanked her and continued to eat. She kept eyeing my plate as I was eating, and I felt a little uncomfortable. My mom saw this and said, "Hey, why don't you give some to Aunt Meg?" I chuckled and said, "Oh, sorry, there's none left. If I'd have known you wanted it, I could have made more." My aunt said, "That's okay. You can just give me half of yours." I was a little taken aback and looked at my mom, but she nodded at me, urging me to give her my food. I said, "Didn't you guys have dinner already?" She said, "Yes, but you know I can't control myself around your food." She even went to the kitchen and got a plate and a fork for herself and was coming over to where I was sitting to take food from me. I stood up and said, "Hey, I think I'm gonna go finish this in my room." Went to my room and locked the door and finished my food. By the time I came out, my aunt was gone and my mother was very mad at me for disrespecting her like that. Was I in the wrong here? Edit. Wow, thanks for the upvotes. I just want to say that I'm not overweight. I'm 6 feet tall and weigh 63 kilograms, so I'm definitely not overweight. And I cooked in a 1.5 quart and made just enough to feed myself. And also, I'm still in school, so I live with my parents and they buy the groceries. You guys need to stop sending me messages about how I'm fat and greedy. I'm not fat, and even if I was, it doesn't matter. Stop shaming me. Also, my aunt was acting greedy, but that does not mean you get to shame her. Please stop. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you give your aunt some of your spaghetti or not? Please let us know.
If she asked nicely, I would, but she kind of came off entitled.
Want to talk to the boss? Cast. We've got me. We've got my son, who is 2. We've got the crazy tenant and the building owner. Back in 2012 to 2015, I worked as a building supervisor with 7 buildings I took care of. I also had a side job as a contractor to paint any apartment that needed it. I only did this part-time because of other duties from my buildings. If I didn't have time for painting, my employer would hire outside workers. I had been a painter for about 8 years by this time and did a very good job. I wanted everything perfect. At the time, my son was only 2 years old, and I had him with me for 2 weeks. I had other building supers who were taking care of my buildings for my 2 weeks off. My boy started talking really early, and by 2 he could speak quite clearly. He didn't make much sense, but you could understand every word he said. I got a call from one of my tenants angrily telling me that I must come to her place to paint her living room. Her grandkids colored all over the walls with Sharpies, and she has company coming and would be totally embarrassed if they saw her walls. I kindly told her that I'm on my 2 weeks vacation and can't help. She started screaming into the phone, telling me it's my job, and I have to do this or she won't pay rent next month. I told her to call the building owners and explain that to them and that they have 3 other painters on call. That went over like a loud fart in church. Then I told her that my painting and landlord status were 2 separate jobs and I'm on a 2-week vacation from both. She hung up and called the building owner. She called me after asking my side. I told her and she just laughed about it and said, if she calls back, just have fun. But she knows better than to threaten holding the rent back because I warned her if she didn't pay, she couldn't stay. I miss that woman. Less than 5 minutes later, I got the call I was expecting from the crazy tenant. She tried telling me the owner said I had to be there by tonight to get it done immediately. I laughed and told her I already talked to Tina, not real name, and I am still on vacation. That's when she said she meant my boss from painting. Malicious compliance activated. I said, he is right here beside me. I'll put you on speaker so we can all straighten this out together. So I put the phone on speaker and told my son he is wanted on the phone. He loved talking on the phone. He didn't listen to you. He would just tell you about what's going on with his day, tell you what he's watching on TV, tell you about the puppy pooping in the grass. She couldn't be rude to a toddler, so after a few minutes of him chattering away, I picked up the phone and took it off speaker. This set my little man into a freakout. I said into the phone, "That's my boss. By the sounds of him right now, it doesn't sound like I can make it tonight." She just hung up, and I didn't get a call from her after. I had to call my mom to settle him down again. My mother loves all the kids and would sit on the phone with any of her 10 grandkids for hours and loved every second. Am I the jerk for kicking out my sister, brother-in-law, and their kids after months of living in chaos? During the middle of everything going on, my brother-in-law got laid off, and because they could no longer afford rent, my sister, her husband, and their 3 kids, aged 5 to a newborn, moved in with me. I, 22, male, live in a small flat, but since I work nights and sleep most of the day, it's sort of like they live in the flat and I'm just some random guy. I understand that kids are very hard to take care of, but I expected my sister to at least try and keep the flat clean. That would be a hard no, since every time I come home, there's dirty dishes all over the place and toys on the floor, and it just smells awful. I don't know what it is, and neither does my sister, evidently, but it's terrible. The eldest colored all over the wall and spilt juice all over my rug. She also broke several fragile glass figurines that I inherited from my mother, who has passed away. My sister, we don't share the same mother, disregarded all of these things, and when I got upset, just told me to get over it because her kid didn't mean it. I've had to get rid of a chair because the second eldest vomited all over it, and nothing would save it. The youngest cried a lot, and it understandably irritated my neighbors, who never said anything to the landlady but did come over multiple times to complain. I have sat my sister down and explained my frustrations to her multiple times, but she just doesn't care. I've tried to explain everything to my brother-in-law, but he's rarely home, despite not having a job yet, even though it's been months. The kids were up at the same time that I was asleep, and they constantly ran in and out of my room, screaming their little heads off. I love them, really, but I couldn't deal with that, especially since you have to be alert and present in my line of work, security guard. The final straw for me was that somebody, more than likely the eldest, let loose my leopard geckos. It took hours, and although I finally managed to find all of them, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I told my sister that she had to leave and that I couldn't take it anymore. It's been a week since then. I've gotten no word from my sister, but the rest of our family has been calling nonstop, demanding to know how I could just kick my niece and nephews onto the street. Am I the jerk? Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you let them keep living with you or not? Please let us know. The time I ended my high school teacher's career. This story is widely known amongst my family and is constantly brought up and joked upon in my group of friends, even years later. A buddy of mine suggested that this is the perfect place to make it public, so let's get into this crap storm. Backstory. I was a senior in high school at the time, and I had never been the brightest student. I was a solid C student, and I had never received a detention or had any kind of bad student record. This is important because to this day, I still have no idea why the teacher treated me this way. The teacher, whom we will name Mrs. Frank, had been a teacher there for more than a decade and was widely known for being a petty, heartless jerk, who the administrator saw as the golden child. Mrs. Frank taught algebra, which is my worst subject, so naturally I had issues understanding the lessons and would ask questions frequently. To some, these questions are easily answered, but to me, it was rocket science. Usually when someone asks a dumb question, no one should address it. However, in Mrs. Frank's case, she would belittle me in front of everyone by saying things such as,
"And here comes the slow boy again. Wow, surprise, surprise. You don't understand it again? Really? We have to go extra slow for you today, don't we?" etc., etc. I tried going to the administration about it before, but again, she was considered the golden child. They would send someone in to examine her during class, she would act respectful and normal for one day, and go back to being a jerk the next. This goes on for about half the year until I had enough. I went to the local Radio Shack, bought a recorder, and secretly recorded every insult she would throw at me. I would sometimes instigate to make up for the lost time. Go ahead, feed the fire. Fast forward to the end of the year, and I'm sitting in Mrs. Frank's class when I ask a question. Her response, and I quote, because it's burned into my brain, was, "I've been teaching here for over 10 years, and that was the single dumbest question I've ever heard come from anyone's mouth." She continued the lesson without answering. I calmly stood up, packed up my stuff, and headed to the nurse's office to dismiss myself from school.
We were allowed to dismiss ourselves if we were 18. I went home, compiled all of the brutal tapes into one glorious masterpiece, and headed back the next day to show the administrators. I sat down with the principal and we listened to a couple of the insults before he stopped me. He wanted more witnesses present, as well as Mrs. Frank. He told me we would meet the next day where I could show him and the rest of the administrators the full tape. I walk into school the next morning being the most nervous I've ever been for anything. I was called down to the office where I met with some board directors, the local school police officer, the principal, the vice principal, and Mrs. Franks. What follows was some of the greatest minutes of my life. I watched as the administrators went from fed up with being in another useless meeting to furious and speechless, with some of them keeping their mouths open for the duration of the tape. I also watched Mrs. Frank go from confident and stuck up to her realizing that she had messed up beyond repair. She was publicly roasting herself in front of the most important people from the district. The tape ended, and without hesitation, the administrators looked around in astonishment, and the principal turned to me and says, "I think we have heard everything we need to. Thank you." And I was quietly dismissed from the room. The final time I saw Mrs. Frank was leaving the room. I looked back and we made eye contact through her tear-filled eyes as I gave the biggest, most evil smile. I returned to class the next week, and Mrs. Frank was nowhere to be found. The story spread quickly throughout the school, and I was seen as a saint. I had successfully gotten her fired and made it almost impossible for Mrs. Frank to return to her teaching career, as well as cut off most of her connections she had with other teachers in the school. I had ruined her financially because no school district in the area would hire this walking piece of garbage. If you're reading this, Mrs. Frank, I'd like to take this moment to tell you to go forget yourself. Karen insults others for not being religious, gets puked on by a crafty kid. My aunt, we'll call her Karen here, seemed to have an obsession with virtue signaling. Growing up, she loved telling others how better she was than everyone else. Her go-to points for this were being vegan and being Christian. This story is about the latter. For many Christmases, Aunt Karen would make a point to tell me or my dad what bad people we were for not being religious, like she was. We never went to church, and my dad never made me take Sunday school. I remember Aunt Karen saying things like, "That's not gonna get you to heaven. You know, it's called Christmas for a reason. There's no Santa Claus in the Bible." She made snide remarks when my cousins and I watched cartoons with Santa in them. At one point, when I was a little older, she even said something to the effect of, "People who don't celebrate Christmas for anything other than Christ will go to heck." I don't know why my dad kept inviting her over. Something about Christmas makes people think they're obligated to be with toxic people only because they're family. One Christmas Eve, I was already in my moody, rebellious teen years, so I wasn't very merry to begin with. I dreaded having to spend another night with people that couldn't stand each other. Aunt Karen was especially snide this year, making comments like, "You wouldn't be so gloomy if you went to church for once," or "Kids today need the fear of God to straighten up. OP sins are making him miserable." The last straw was when I heard Karen essentially tell my dad, "Your son will grow up to be a criminal if he's not taught about God in the Bible." I had enough of this lady being a jerk every Christmas, so I hatched a plan to get her out of my dad's house. When I was a kid, I used to be lactose intolerant, but my dad kept a jug of milk in the fridge to go with the Christmas cookies he bought for our relatives. When no one was looking, I drank a glass of milk in the kitchen and carried on like nothing had happened. After a while, I started feeling nauseous, but did my best to hide it. I made sure to stay near Aunt Karen whenever I could. Eventually, I started gagging, and then finally, I let out a projectile of white gunk and stomach acid on Aunt Karen. She screamed in horror about me being a disgusting little brat and how her sparkling red dress was ruined. I pretended to cry and acted remorseful, making my other relatives sympathize with me. My dad was frustrated that he had to clean the carpet and sent me to my room. I eavesdropped on Karen, lashing out at my dad for getting puked on, and finally, my dad seemed to get the hint that his sister shouldn't have been invited. He told her to leave, so she did, with my cousins in tow. I got in trouble for not using the bathroom when I threw up, but I didn't care. Karen made Christmas miserable for me, my dad, and most likely my cousins, her kids, so I decided to return the favor. I thought I'd take this small victory to my grave until I discovered Reddit. Merry Christmas, you filthy animal! Have you ever had an aunt that you just couldn't stand? If so, what did she do? Please let us know.
I've got a co-host I can't stand, I'll tell you that much.
Fine, I won't wear those boots anymore. You win. Another tale of me and the dress code. Background. If you read my recess story, then you already know I'm not a fan of dress codes for the sake of dress codes. So when I left for boarding school, I was utterly thrilled to go to a school that didn't have any uniform at all. Okay, so it's not really that I have a problem with dress codes. I have a problem with conforming. So if you say socks have to be black or blue, 99.99% of people will assume that you mean navy blue. I'm the person who would show up with sky blue, just to silently stand out for a day, just to give a smirk to the other 5 people who will think, well, they did just say blue, just to highlight to the bureaucrat who wrote the rules that they're not as airtight as they thought they were. In short, I am, as my hubby would say, a brat. It's just fun, to me, to show people that either/or doesn't always have to be your only choices. We'll just say I was an adventurous dresser. I liked unusual combinations, and had I been encouraged instead of discouraged and taught how to sew, I very probably would have ended up a low-level fashion designer. Clothes were like paint to me after an entire childhood in the same plaid. I wanted to mix colors and textures and brushes. Boarding school is not really a colorful, choose-your-own-adventure kind of place. Though I was a precocious child, I was never a rule breaker, save for very calculated rule breaking in my previous story. My mother always said, "Voodoo daughter's obedient and well-behaved. She will bend a rule into a pretzel, but she'll never intentionally break one." She was the kind of parent who had to carefully word rules and restrictions when leaving me to my own devices, but also be careful not to put ideas into my head at the same time. Basically, if you give me the impression that you believe something is ironclad, I'll pick it apart just because I enjoy the mental exercise of seeing if it really is ironclad. But if you're a jerk, I'm going to find the worst way to show you that it's not ironclad. My mother firmly believed that critical thinking is the key to success in life. If you can assess a problem and find a path to a solution, then you don't need to know everything. You just need to know how to find answers. Mind you, this was about a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't blame parents today for different mentalities. But I do still think I would raise my kids this way if I were going to have any. So I had been raised to believe that the people who get ahead in life are the people who don't just say apple when asked what the red round thing on the desk is. You pick it up, you turn it over, you note the feel and the weight, you mark the smell and the reflections in the wax, and you file that away for later. Never know when someone's going to ask you what the bottom of an apple looks like when there are no apples to look at, right? Anyhow, when you spend your life mentally picking up every problem, question, and object so you can flip it over, turn it inside out, change the colors, etc., mundane things like school handbooks actually become a bit fun. The story. I went to a boarding school with 2 types of dress code. We had classroom dress, which was exactly what it sounds like. We were basically expected to look like young professionals. All the normal rules you would expect. Skirts below the fingertips for girls, shirts and ties for the boys. The handbook was pretty specific, as most are. The alternative was what we could wear in our free time, town dress, and it was the standard we were expected to dress to when seen in public, off campus, or just spending time in the students' lounge. This was more relaxed, but still had plenty of rules that we had to follow. I had a pair of knee-high suede moccasin boots with fringe at the top, just below the knee. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one in black, one in brown. They were the most comfortable, warm boots I've ever owned. My mother and I fought constantly over these boots, and it was a great triumph to me that she had allowed me to spirit them away to school with me. Then, one day I was approached by a teacher who told me that the teachers had had a discussion and my boots weren't in the spirit of classroom dress. "But I've read the dress code. There's nothing in there against them," I protested. "I know. It's just been decided that they don't meet the spirit of the dress code," she elaborated. "But they're the right color." "I know." "They're the right fabric. Suede is allowed." "I know." "There's no restriction on boot length. You allow riding boots for the equestrian club." "I know." "Then why?" I don't really know if I was angry or sad or an even split of both, but I was emotional. "I wish I had better answers for you." She was a teacher I liked, and I knew she liked me. I realized why they had sent her. I wasn't the sort to make a scene or cause a fuss. I was the sort to get even. "Okay," I said, and walked off. That night, I studied the dress code front to back. I read every sentence forwards and backwards. I said them out loud. I held up every article of clothing mentioned and studied it as if I were an alien who had nothing but the handbook and that piece of clothing to figure out how it was used by humans. It was a pretty strict handbook. I had to give them that. But they had made 2 mistakes. The handbook was oddly unspecific about which items of clothing were to be worn where. And nowhere did the handbook say we had to make an effort to actually look good. They discussed what articles of clothing needed to be what colors and how far they needed to extend in certain directions. Shoes had to be reasonable colors like black or brown, like my boots were, or other earth tones, but it never said they couldn't be elf shoes, for example. Granted, elf shoes wouldn't be in the spirit of classroom dress, but I digress. I went to bed furious and with vicious ideas circling in my mind, debating whether or not I wanted to pull this particular trigger. Eventually, I decided I'd wait until morning, and if I still felt that way, I would begin phase 1. The next morning, I woke up, still angry, and began a mental list of the worst boys in my grade as I walked to breakfast. When I got there, I found a few of them and pointed out that the handbook specified that ties were to be tied in a single or double Windsor knot at all times unless it was a bow tie, and then it was to be tied in the traditional manner. Don't know what that's called. What it didn't specify is what part of the body it was to be affixed to. Nowhere did it specify that ties had to be tied around the neck, just how they needed to be tied. I told them that they didn't have to believe me. Just read their handbooks that night and do what they will with the information. The next day, there were ties on wrists, around eyeglasses, foreheads, ankles, knees, thighs. Anywhere you could attach a Windsor knot to the human body, there was a boy in my school with a tie there. I was feeling pretty darn proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were annoyed, but most found it amusing. Until we got to math class. There was a kid in class without his tie on, the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher walked up to his desk and looked down her nose at him.
I understand you boys are having some fun with your ties today, and I think we've been pretty good sports. But if you know the handbook this well, then you know you at least have to be wearing a tie.
He raised his head, smirked, and said, "Oh, I'm wearing one. You just can't see it." The class erupted. Now, maybe he had it under his pants on his ankle or tied around his elbow under his blazer. I'll never know. By the end of the day, I was a legend for finding the loophole, and he was a legend for what he had put the loophole around. By morning announcements, the dress code had been updated. We were all handed a printed page, so we couldn't claim we didn't know, to include specifications about ties around necks, and the fun was over for the boys. Phase 2 was a little more in-depth. I studied the handbook and I took mental notes. I had been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver with holographic rainbow interlocking circles on them. They sported a 2-inch platform with a chunky 4-inch heel and laced up just above the ankles. They looked like something Rami and Michelle would have worn on their final prom scene, or Fran Drescher and the nanny. Ungodly. I knew I couldn't wear them to class, but I wanted them for town days so bad. Like I said, after 9 years in uniform, I was having fun with fashion. I saved for months and visited them at the mall every chance I got. I had been slowly talking myself out of such a frivolous pair of boots. They were so expensive. But the loss of my favorite classroom boots had reinvigorated my lust for them. And right after my moccasins were revoked, I had managed to save up just enough to afford them. Lucky me. I practically skipped to the store to get my holographic rainbow platform boots that weekend. They were out of my size. I nearly cried. Until I noticed right next to them was the black patent leather version. Until now, they had seemed so tame by comparison, but the dress code had a special section about patent leather footwear. It was specifically permitted, but only when wearing pants, so I could not wear the rainbow boots to class, but their sister boots in black patent leather with silver details were totally permitted. Silver also being specifically permitted on shoes, as some might have grommets for laces. Still sporting the 2-inch platform and 4-inch heel, mind you. The school didn't have any limits on heel size, assuming high schoolers wouldn't want to be in heels all day, I guess. Something about losing the whimsy of the silver holographic rainbows also had the bonus effect of taking them from a club kid mood to a darker realm. And to think, I would never have even considered the black pair if it weren't for my recent fascination with our dress code. The black boots also happened to be on discount, whereas my silver ones would have been full price. So I walked away with enough money to buy a pair of pants to wear with my new boots. A plan began to formulate in my devious brain. I invited my friends to join me at one of the local thrift stores, and we spent the afternoon hunting for the ugliest pants we could find that were still within the guidelines of the school dress code. And we did. They were bright orange polyester pants with little gray-green amorphous dots on them, something akin to an incredibly tiny giraffe print. You almost couldn't make out the green, just that there was a pattern to the orange. Something about the two colors clashed enough that they almost vibrated in front of your eyes, making you half dizzy / half nauseated if you stared too long. And as luck would have it, I scored a deal on an orange shag weather that was the exact same shade. I looked like a half-finished Sesame Street character on top and a lost disco reject on bottom. Oh, did I mention that they were slightly belled, straight-legged orange polyester pants? I strolled into class on a Monday looking like a rejected extra from Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had heavy wooden heels that clunked loudly everywhere I walked. I now stood 4 inches taller, making me stand out even more in the halls and rivaling some of my teachers for presence in the classroom. I watched some of them glare at my new boots and began to figure out which ones had taken issue with my knee-high moccasins. I could tell the teachers who were getting a laugh out of it too, but I didn't stop there. It became my life's mission to seek out the most horrendous clothing and outfits I could concoct. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I had been so careful when I packed to make sure my clothes had all been suitable, and by their own admission, my boots were within the code. They just hadn't liked them. I had done my utmost to dress within their rules, and they had arbitrarily decided something wasn't good enough because they didn't like it. So now I wore something hideous every single day, so they had to see me in something nobody liked. Every single day. After all, what could they do? Just tell me every single day that I wasn't dressed appropriately, but never in violation? At some point, I would cry it was personal. By their own admission, it didn't violate the rules, and I was certain to never violate the rules. That just wasn't my style. Plus, at this point in a battle of wills, you can't afford to get sloppy and give the other side any advantage. Mom always said I was stubborn. The nice thing about boarding school is the girls are happy to share clothes around with anyone who will share back. So instead of just one closet, I had like 30 to pick from just in my dorm. Sure, most of my clothes matched each other by intent and planning, but they looked absurd with clothes picked by / for other people. Someone might have a loud shirt they only wear with a black skirt, but I'd pair it with a printed skirt from 3 rooms down in clashing colors just because I could, still within code. I wore those crazy boots anytime I didn't have on a skirt. I invested in more polyester than a school should legally be allowed to have on campus for fire safety reasons. I sought out every consignment, vintage, secondhand shop in town, and there were a lot. It was a largely hippie town, so the pickings were fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties. I braided my bangs into a single braid and would put heavy earrings at the end to weigh it down, then swing it around like a pendulum over my desk or book during class by swirling my head. At the parent-teacher meeting, they asked my mom if they could speak to me about my clothing, and she asked, surprised, if I was breaking any rules. They explained about the boots. Mom told me she laughed and said there was nothing she could do. If there's one thing my daughter hates, it's being punished for a rule she didn't know existed or a rule that never existed in the first place. If you want to make a rule today to stop her, she won't do it tomorrow. I bet you never saw those boots again, but you took away something she loved for seemingly no good reason. She sees that as a punishment, even if you only saw it as a request, and now she's punishing you back. Simple as that. I suggest you just let it go and fix your handbook over the summer. Otherwise, you'll run out of paper trying to print daily changes to keep up with the loopholes she'll find. My daughter loves finding loopholes. I should never have given her so many riddles as a kid. Upon hearing this, they admitted that the only reason my new boots had been ignored thus far is that, this having been my reaction to the banning of the first pair, some were fearful what I might find to wear in retaliation if a second pair was banned. And, obedient student that I was, I never did wear my knee-high suede moccasins again. Random conclusion stuffs. They never did come after me for a single other dress code issue except once when my skirt was too short. Honestly, not intentional. Each teacher measured slightly differently, and I didn't return the next year for entirely unrelated reasons, so I didn't know what changes they may have made. So remember to take your problems, turn them on their side, flip them inside out, look at life from a funny angle, and you never know what cracks you might find. And it's another great story of my awesome mom totally having my back. Though looking back as an adult, I'll bet she was a little upset they banned her boots too. I mean, after all, if they had been more specific in the handbook, she could have kept them at home the entire time instead of in my closet at school gathering dust. Miss you, Mom. Edit for comments. No, I'm not a lawyer in my adult life. It just wasn't my path. But I'm self-employed, starting a business in an industry I'm extremely excited and passionate about, and I enjoy nearly every single minute of work I have put into it. I'm blessed and thankful to love what I do. Have you ever gotten in trouble for violating a dress code? If so, what did you do wrong? Please let us know.
There's got to be some sort of code your head violates. Looks like a balloon.
I need 3 out of 4 manager approvals? I'll get them myself then. This was about 4 years ago. I worked at a management company in the accounting department. I was the jack of all trades, being trained to fill in any spot that was empty on any given day. A spot that was routinely empty was water meter reader once a month. Reading the meters was nice because you got to leave the office, but we had horrible accommodations to help us, and the job took all week just to finish reading the meters, not including entering all of the data when we got back. After 2 months, I realized we could speed up the process if we used iPads instead of paper. It allows us to carry more information with us while losing less during the process. It would eliminate second trips to double-check numbers in the field instead of waiting 3 days until we could get back to the office and log on to the computer. This company had 4 owners, and each managed a different department. Karen ran the accounting department. Karen was, as the name suggests, a manager Karen. The other 3 departments were run by Mary, Susan, and Amy. I brought up my idea to Karen, and she shoots it down. She tells me,
"It won't work. We've never done it like that. And besides, you need 3 managers to approve your request anyway."
Now, typically requests went to your department head, and then she would take them to the other managers for further approval. But Karen decided to shut me down from the get, all because she didn't think of it herself. Whatever. I went to Susan first because Susan loved me. I laid out my plan to get approval for the iPad. Susan thought it was a fantastic idea, but didn't want to come against Karen. Still, she said if I got the other 2 on board, she'd 100% have my back. Mary was next. Mary was the one I had to sign out the iPad from anyway. I explained how I had already made sure no one else had requested the iPad for those days, and how this would save the company time and therefore money. Mary was hooked. Amy was last. I wasn't sure how to approach Amy with the plan. I was careful, only giving away the information I absolutely needed to in order to find out how to get her approval. Amy asked if Karen approved. When I said no, Amy immediately said yes. I hadn't realized Amy was sick of Karen and would pretty much say anything to upset her. Now that I had 3 out of 4 approvals, I took the iPad with me on the next meter reading, conveniently forgetting to mention to Karen what I had done. When we cut down our week of work to 3 days, Karen asked how we finished so quickly. That's when I showed her and the other 3 managers how well the iPad idea worked. Karen still tried to veto me, but the other 3 managers essentially told her that my idea was being implemented on a permanent basis and she was just going to have to deal with it. The next month, I realized the largest property we had to do readings for had a golf cart for general workers' use. I again approached Karen with the idea of getting approval to use the golf cart and cut down our 3 days down to 2, along with allowing us to bring water throughout the property and not dealing with dehydration and overheating. Karen repeated what she said the first time. I would need 3 managers' approval and I didn't have hers, so I went round again doing the same thing. Susan and Amy were on board immediately, but Mary didn't want to come around this time. Mary said I would need approval from the board of directors for the property to use the golf cart. Lucky me, I knew the board because every time we read meters, they came out to chat with us. During our next meter reading, I played up the heat and the walking, mentioning how nice it would be to be able to drive our vehicles, but knowing it would tear up the grass. One particularly loud board member, nicknamed Red for her hair, made a big stink and got me approval by that night. Mary approved the use of the golf cart the next day, and we were done in 2 hours, what normally took us all day. Going back early really upset Karen again, because I didn't follow company protocol with my ideas. She insisted that had I simply persevered, she would have taken my ideas to the others eventually. She actually told me eventually. Meanwhile, it only took me 3 months to reduce a job from a week's worth of work minimum to 4 days maximum. The other managers have set up a permanent schedule for the current water meter readings, and I now have a new job where my boss actually listens to my ideas. Let this be a lesson. Context. This story is about my sister, who is very much into the goth scene. My sister is also a teacher, and for professional reasons, she tones down the goth for school, but still wears a lot of black and gothic jewelry to work. Now onto the story. Last school year, my sister had a student teacher named June. June was a very lovely girl in the classroom, great with the kids, and my sister could tell she would be a great teacher one day. She got along with my sister well enough, but she thought my sister was weird. Well, for being goth. But being in her 30s, my sister doesn't really care. Well, one weekend, my sister went to the mall with a couple of friends, looking like she came out of a Charlotte Brontë novel. Really pale skin and dark makeup. Went into a candy shop, and lo and behold, there's June. My sister went away from her group of friends and to strike up a conversation with June, and here's the interaction. Sister: "Hey June, how's your weekend going?" She was interrupted by June. June: "Yeah, can you get me like 3 pounds of jelly beans and some item I can't remember?" Sister looks at the candy store employees who are wearing blue bright shirts and aprons with the store name on them. My sister looked like Morticia Adams, maybe weekend brain. Sister: "June, it's me, Miss F, your mentor." June: "Yeah, so?" Sister: "You work in my classroom at our Catholic school." June: "And your point is?" Sister: "It's me, Miss Franklin." Not real name, obviously. June: "Again, so what? I need jelly beans and some other item." Sister: "Look, I just came to say hello, but obviously not. You're being really rude right now." June: "How dare you? I go to the fancy college, and I'm a student teacher at a Catholic school. I'm getting the manager." Sister: "Oh, sure, go ahead. I'm also going to tell the headmaster about this incident and your professor. God forbid you to run into any parents or kids outside of school." Sister walked away. She didn't email the headmaster or her professor, but did email June telling her to meet her early on Monday morning. Monday morning comes around, and my sister looks less like Morticia and more like Abby from NCIS. My sister is one of those who, when they are mad, she gets stone-faced, but does not show any emotion. June comes into the classroom all chipper and smiles, and my sister gets up to greet her. Sister: "June, we have a lot to discuss. First, did you not truly know it was me on Saturday at the candy shop?" June's face went white, but she didn't say anything. Sister: "Can you explain your behavior that day, or is that how you are outside of the classroom?" June: "I didn't recognize you at first, but when I did." Sister: "So, you double down on your mistake and make a complete jerk of yourself. You're lucky that I didn't tell the headmaster or your professor about this. Let this be a lesson. You never stop being a teacher outside of school. You may be the only adult your student may trust. If you act the way you did this past weekend and that student sees you act like that, you've just broken that trust. Never do that again." June sobered up real quick after that. They finished up the school year. My sister never saw June again, but she hopes that encounter that weekend taught her something. Am I the jerk for using my future mother-in-law's own line on her? I, 28 female, and my fiance, 28 male, have been together for 9 years, since sophomore year of college, engaged since October of 2019. My future mother-in-law, 54, has 3 sons, of which my fiance is the oldest. She is very much into being matriarch and hates the idea of her little babies growing up and moving on with their lives. She cried for days when me and fiance, then boyfriend, moved into an apartment together after graduating college and asked fiance if I forced him to do it. I was never invited to my future in-laws' home for Thanksgiving or Christmas because that was for family only. My fiance threw down to have me invited in 2019 after we got engaged. I was excluded from photos because those were for family only, and I was only a fiance, not a wife. My future brother-in-law's girlfriend still gets the same treatment. Mother-in-law recently caught wind from fiance of my plans to go wedding dress shopping with my mom, sister, and cousin. She assumed she was invited and called me to ask what day and time. I said, "Oh no, it will just be me, mom, sister, and cousin." She was clearly upset and asked why she couldn't come. I said, "Oh, it's for family only. I'm sure you understand." She sputtered something about having to go and hung up. She later whined to fiance about how I was being mean, excluding her from this experience since she has no daughters. Fiance and his brother with a girlfriend thought it was hilarious, as did the girlfriend, and loved that I turned the tables on her in a way she can't protest against without being marked as a hypocrite. Fiance's youngest brother thinks I'm being mean to her for no reason, and I should be considerate of the fact she has no daughters and let her share this experience. I don't want her there because I want to enjoy the loved ones, and I frankly don't want to include someone in an experience like that who has made a point of excluding me. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Wow. Thanks so much for the support, everyone. To answer some questions, the first 2 years we dated, I had no desire in going to the in-laws for the holidays. Third year was my senior year in college and the first time my fiance wanted me to come. She said no, But hey, we didn't fight it. Subsequent years, fiance was getting more and more worked up, but I told him not to rock the boat. I am very level-headed and calm, and I know better than to enter into open conflict with a crazy person. He's going to shut her down if she keeps whining. Edit 2. Well, she called my mom and asked if she could come. My mom said that was not her decision and to ask me. She seemed to think my mother could command me to invite her, probably because she operates that way. She then told fiance to give me a list of rules for my dress, which include no strapless, no halter, no sweetheart neckline, not too tight. She wants me to look classy. I am an accountant at a global accounting firm, yet she somehow thinks I'm going to embarrass her by not looking classy. Fiance sent her a text. Mom, you're smothering us. This is none of your business, so stop it. She's called him 9 times in the last hour since he got that text. Am I the jerk for cutting my sister off financially when I found out that I was the only sibling paying for her? I have 3 siblings. I am the eldest. My youngest sister is the only one of us who didn't attend college. She got pregnant and dropped out a few months into college. I live in another state and see them only a couple of times a year. I'm not really close to any of them. My sister fell into deep financial crap after the guy took off and the baby, B, had a ton of medical issues that she couldn't afford. In the end, she moved in with my parents. Me and the other siblings decided to pitch in some money each month to help the youngest sister. At first, they told me that since I earn the most, I should contribute more. I firmly said that I will contribute what everyone else is going to contribute, and they agreed. It's been a year, and recently my youngest sister reached out to me and said that she needed money urgently because B needed a surgery the next month. I was a little perplexed. B hasn't been to the hospital for the past 2 months, and the money from those 2 months from all of us should have been more than enough to cover the surgery. I kept pointing this out and asked her what happened to the money. She kept saying that money got used up. At this point, I told her that she was going to have to show me some bills, and she broke down, saying that I'm the only one who is giving her money, and my parents and other siblings asked her to keep that a secret from me. They decided that I'm the one who should pay for everything because I earn more, and I am child-free while the others are not. None of my siblings have kids, but they want to prepare for the future, while I don't have to because I'm not going to have any kids. So for the past year, I'm the only one who has been helping. What's worse, every time she needed X amount of money, she would call me and tell me that she needed 3 times that amount of money and told me that my siblings already paid their share. I was so angry when she confessed. I immediately hung up on her and refused to talk to any of them after that. This literally happened a few days ago. I haven't sent any money this month or for the surgery. Everyone obviously thinks I'm the jerk. I told my siblings that until they match what I've paid last year, they aren't going to see another cent from me. My siblings told me that they cannot afford that much right now and begged me to continue paying or at the very least pay for another year so everyone can figure something else out. I refused to. Am I the jerk here? Karen demands I let her pick me up. Okay, so this happened yesterday and I'm still shook. Basically, our school had an award ceremony for our sports teams. Our school is well known for being very athletically competitive, going to states and regionals and such. Casting. We've got me, we've got best friends 1 and 2, we've got the embarrassed kid. He was really polite and I feel bad for him. We've got the entitled parent and we've got the office nurse. Please note, I'm 13 and I weigh 31 kilograms and I'm really super small. So after an excruciating amount of time sitting on concrete in my own world, everyone started to get up and take photos with family and friends with their medals and ribbons and stuff. Me and my friends found each other. Important to note, we were all standing sorta close to the kids receiving stuff, so we were easily spotted. And after a while of chatting, a super tall boy, wearing like 4 ribbons, walks up to me and awkwardly asks if he can pick me up. Not uncommon for short people to hear, because he's curious or something, I don't know. Anyways, this is how the conversation went. Embarrassed kid. Hey, I don't mean to be weird, but can I pick you up? Me. Oh, sorry, I usually say yes. But I have a bit of a health problem. Entitled parent. What do you mean, no? She put emphasis on the O for some reason. My sweet boy just wants to lift you. It's not inappropriate. So I currently have a mystery infection in my lungs. I've been in and out of the hospital and doctors are stumped by it. Anyway, being lifted or laying with my head lower than my legs stops me from breathing, and occasionally it just gets really bad, even when I'm not doing anything, even when I'm sleeping. And because I'm really skinny, I can feel my bones moving on each other, can even hear it sometimes, so I get cramped pretty easily. I'm perfectly healthy, I just have a really fast metabolism. Me. Oh no, it's not that. I just have a lung problem right now, and that—
Oh, stop whining. You're lying, and I know it.
Embarrassed kid. Mom, please just stop it. It's okay. She just said no.
No, this spoiled little jerk should let you pick her up. It's not a big ask.
She then reaches for me, in which my friends intervene. Best friend 1. She's not lying. She's been in the hospital. Plus, it's none of your business. Best friend 2. Yeah, you're literally trying to grab someone. Entitled Mom. This lady wouldn't let anyone finish their sentences.
Oh, don't give me that. I know she's lying. If she was so sick, she wouldn't be here.
And then this jerk literally pushed past my absolutely amazing friends and grabs me by the bottom of my ribs. Now, this may be okay for other people, but like I mentioned, lung problems and weight problems. So when she grabbed my ribs, she grabbed my ribs. There was a thin layer of skin between her and my bone. She then lifts me up, in which I flail in agony. God, the pain. Not only was she crushing me, I couldn't breathe. Karen.
See? You're lying. Stop screaming. I'm not hurting you.
And that's all I remember before passing out, other than my friends losing their minds screaming for her to drop me, and literally an entire hall of people turning to look at my bony flesh sack flailing in the air. Anyway, I wake up with the office nurse leaning over me with my spacer, the mask they used to give me my Ventolin, and the crazy entitled parent in cuffs for assault on me, etc. Turns out, my lungs literally stopped for around 5 seconds and I turned completely blue. Anyway, I get tested in the back of the ambo and had a fun talk with the paramedics, telling them about this crazy jerk. They laughed and said I should press charges. I am. That lady could have really hurt me. So yeah, I'm in the hospital right now. Turns out I have one dislocated rib. The bottom rib where she grabbed me got pushed under the rest, which is why my lungs stopped for a bit. I don't know what's gonna happen. We will charge her 100%, but I'm gonna try and avoid being too involved because it's midterm right now and I need to get through high school. Would you let Karen pick you up if she asked, or not? Please let us know.
Your head's so big I probably couldn't pick you up if I tried.
Am I the jerk for telling my former stepson the real reason I didn't see him much after the divorce? I was married to my ex-wife for 9 years. I came into my stepson's life when he was 4, and my wife and I divorced when he was 13. It's been 7 years since the divorce. I've since remarried and have 2 kids with my current wife. I raised my stepson, I'll be calling him JT, as my own, and I loved being his father. We were very close, and I wanted to adopt him, but was constantly blocked by his biological dad, who's a real jerk. The divorce between me and my ex-wife was messy. We married too young, and looking back, she was a toxic and negative force in my life. I also didn't know it then, but she is also bipolar, which was undiagnosed and untreated when we were together, and it explains a lot of the behavior I witnessed. I wanted to stay in my JT's life since I basically helped raise him, but my ex refused to let me see him and threatened to tell him lies about me if I pursued any legal routes for visitation. At the time, I was newly laid off and unable to afford a good lawyer. I really regret not fighting harder / calling her bluff, but I was afraid she'd turn him against me or even lie to the police and get me arrested for something I didn't do. JT and I reconnected last year. He's 20 now and living on his own and in college, for engineering at that. We've been playing catch up and he's met my wife and one of my daughters. I've given him some things for his apartment, etc. He eventually asked me why I didn't stick around after his mom and I split. I told him pretty point blank, your mom made sure I couldn't. I didn't go into detail with the threats or why we split up in the first place, but I let him know she had strong-armed me into being no contact. JT was understandably furious. Obviously, I didn't expect his mom to have told him the truth, but I didn't realize how in the dark he'd been. I got a call from my ex, I have the same number as I always have, with her cussing me out for slandering her to her son and talking to him in general. This is the first I've heard from her in 5 years, by the way. She apparently hadn't known JT reached out to me. I told her to never contact me again and that her son's a grown man and can do as he wishes. I've deleted her number and talked to JT, who confirmed that he confronted his mom and they fought. He's clearly really upset that she lied to him for so long and feels really betrayed by her. I feel terrible, and I'm wondering if maybe honesty or full honesty wasn't the best policy in this situation. I don't want to cause rifts in a family, even if it's my ex. She and I have a bad history, but I know she loves her son. Well, what do you think? Did OP do anything wrong or not? Please let us know.
The only thing he did wrong was her. Get her some Neosporin for that burn.
Entitled dad causes trouble in a restaurant. Sweet kids beg him to stop. So I was out with my family at a restaurant. It was a well-liked and highly reviewed Chinese restaurant. This story is short but sweet. Cast: we've got entitled dad. We've got sweet kids, his 2 daughters. We've got restaurant manager and the waitress. My family and I were set eating our food when entitled parent and his sweet kids are seated a few tables away. Entitled dad seemed pretty friendly, asking staff questions about the place and having general conversations with them. They order their food arrives and they start eating. While they're eating, a fly lands on entitled dad's food. The fly didn't come from the kitchen. It wasn't on the plate or in the food. It came through the entrance and was flying around the restaurant. Entitled dad was complaining about it to sweet kids who were laughing and joking about it. Entitled dad says, "It's really not funny, girls. It's a sign of poor hygiene. Do I look like I'm laughing? This is serious." Entitled dad calls a waitress over and says, "A fly just landed on my food. What are you going to do about it? It's put me right off my food." Waitress asks if it was in the food when it came out of the kitchen, and entitled dad said, "No, it just landed on it." Waitress stood there, unsure of what she was supposed to do about it. She offered to take the food back to the kitchen and get a replacement, but he said no. Entitled dad continued to complain to her. Side note, I work in hospitality, and there's literally nothing you can do about a fly that comes in through the entrance to the building when a customer comes in. I genuinely don't know what he was expecting of her. Eventually, waitress goes to get the restaurant manager, and even he didn't know what to do. He apologized, but there wasn't really anything he could do about it besides offer him more food. Sweet kids were still laughing at this point, and entitled dad was telling them off because of how serious it was. Eventually, entitled dad loses his temper and says, "You know what? It doesn't matter. I'll just eat it," or something along those lines. The manager and waitress walked away. Entitled dad is still complaining to sweet kids, and he doesn't touch any more of his food. Sweet kids are still happily eating. Entitled dad forces the sweet kids to leave their food and leave the restaurant. He asks for the bill. Waitress: £35, please. Entitled dad: "Really? Do you really think you should charge me that much when I didn't eat the food?" Waitress again stood there, not knowing what to do. They continued telling him he had to pay £35, and entitled dad continued refusing. Entitled dad was close to shouting, and restaurant manager and waitress were trying to resolve it. Sweet kids were literally almost crying by this point, shouting, "Dad, stop! Just pay the bill so we can leave," and things like that. Entitled dad says, "Go wait outside, girls. I'm not paying £35 for food I didn't even eat." This went on for literally about an hour. Entitled dad then goes, "I'm not paying £35. I'll pay £10 and nothing more," then slams his money on the counter and leaves. Both restaurant manager and waitress are in complete shock, and I'm ranting to my family by this point because I worked as a waitress and felt terrible for the staff. What was entitled dad expecting them to do? They can't stand at every door and window and get every fly that tries to enter. It wasn't in any way their fault. An entitled dad refused to have a new meal brought out. Manager came over to us and apologized, and all my mom said was, "What a jerk." And this made manager and waitress smile a bit. They were comforted by the fact that we agreed with them and thinking entitled dad was out of order. It was a lot more dramatic than it sounds here, I promise. Am I the jerk for saying no to my nephew using my late son's college fund instead? My wife and I, 36 female, 37 male, lost our son Ryan 3 years ago when he was 11. Before he was born, my wife's parents gave us a large sum to start up on his college fund, and we've been putting money on the side for years so that he can use it once he went to college. Unfortunately, he never got the chance, and we haven't touched that money since. It's taken time, but with a lot of therapy, we made peace with our loss. We've even started talking about trying to have another baby next year. My sister and her family came to our house Sunday morning, and we were talking about my nephew Steven now being in his last year of high school. It brought up questions about what his plans were after graduating, and he said college, though he's not sure what he wants to study. When my nephew wasn't around, my sister mentioned that they've been worrying about how they'll afford college for him. His GPA is average, and he doesn't do any activities outside of his studies, so they say they don't think he'll have much of a chance with scholarships. He'll have to rely on student loans and financial aid. My sister mentioned Ryan's college fund and how it would be a huge help if Steven got that for himself. We were caught off guard and didn't know what to say. With talks about having a baby, we decided we wouldn't touch that money for now and had to tell her no. We explained we weren't sure if we want to use that money for future baby expenses or if maybe that will be our child's college fund to use in the future. My sister became upset and felt it wasn't fair we were keeping this money all for a hypothetical child when my nephew is an actual living person who will benefit from it. She said we won't struggle financially with a new kid since we both earn a good income and we can always save more money, which is true, but there's no guarantee we'll always be making the same income with the state of the world, and at least that money is there now. She kept pushing this to the point where it was becoming an argument. What struck a nerve was when my sister said, "It's not like anyone else is using that money right now." I don't know why it bothered me. I suppose it's the way she casually mentioned my son no longer being with us. My wife was growing uncomfortable with the whole thing, so I firmly said no, and that's the end of it. There was tension after, and my sister was in a sour mood until they left. I later received a message from her later on stating how selfish she thinks we are being, and she thought we would help Steven since we claim to love him so much, yet won't help him provide for his future. I didn't want to get into it with her and decided not to respond, but I still keep reading her text. Are we in any way being jerks here? We do love Steven and want him to succeed, but we had already agreed that money would be used for our future kid. It's all very conflicting and hard not to feel guilty over our choices. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you give your sister the money or not? Please let us know.
No, but I'd give her a punch in the face, I'll tell you that much.
I don't work here at the moment. Important to the story. I took some time off to work on a novel I've been writing. Seemed like the time to do it with everything going on right now and me having no immune system. I worked for a towing company. Everything is appointment-based where I worked because of what's going on. That makes sense, right? Apparently not. I've been off work for about 4 months now. I help with paperwork here and there, but that's sent to me via email so I don't have to leave my house. It's a good system. I finally had to leave my house. I realized that I forgot one of my flash drives at the office. It's the one I would add random notes to for the book that I'm writing. I stopped at the office today to pick up my flash drive. It's hidden. I wasn't about to call and be like, "Hey, can you go into the storage room, move the first aid kit, pull out the box of envelopes, reach in and grab my flash drive?" So I did it myself. I walked in, put in my codes to get to the back, and went about my business. My boss knew I was coming in to get something, saw me and said, "Hey, hope you're doing well," and went back to work. Just as I stepped out of the storage room with my flash drive in hand, I hear it. The screech of an entitled jerk. She was losing her mind because both the people who could help her were taking calls and couldn't just step off the phone to help this person. She also hadn't booked an appointment because the appointment sheet is on the door as you head into the back part of the office. I proceeded to take the side exit and disappear. So I thought. I made it through the shop where all the trucks are parked and left through a different door. This lady saw me leave through the side door, bolted outside, and literally ran to the door I left through, screaming that I need to help her. I just looked at her crazy self and said no. I continued walking to my car with her following me, screaming and screaming. I should also mention that there are some puddles in the yard because winter came and left in the span of a few days and it hasn't all dried up yet. She stepped in a mud puddle and fell over, screaming louder than before. I turned to see if she was okay, and she had alerted a few of the drivers with her banshee scream, who also came to check on her. When the drivers were coming to help, she started screaming about how I had pushed her down. One of the drivers went and got the boss. He came out, asked what happened, and stuck to her story about how I had pushed her and I needed to be fired. My boss looked her dead in the eye. "She doesn't work here, and you don't get to dictate who gets fired here. Sorry." She wanted the cops called immediately. My boss asked if she was sure. She screamed, repeating the word, "Yes." He asked again if she was sure while gesturing to the 4 cameras in the yard. She legit turned white, got up, went to her car, and left. My boss busted out laughing the second she peeled out of the yard. He also told me to have a good rest of my day and to call if I needed anything. Am I the jerk for telling my wife she's the reason she's not invited to her daughter's wedding? I, male 43, have been with my wife for 4 years. I have a 19-year-old stepdaughter. She struggled a lot during her parents' divorce, and she hasn't gotten therapy till I came into the picture. That's when I noticed how depressed she was. She used to yell and argue all the time. She was harsh and hostile towards me. But that changed when I started fixing her problems one by one, and it turned out she needed healing and being heard and understood. We now have one of the best relationships I have in my life. I appreciate the effort she's made to be who she is today. She told me and her mom that she was going to get married to her boyfriend who she knew from high school. Her mom got mad at her for wanting to get married at this age and while in college, even though my wife got married for the first time at a young age and had rough times trying to make a living and raising a kid. She lashed out at her daughter, telling her to drop it, but my stepdaughter called her selfish and controlling and that she shouldn't try to enforce her opinions on her and decide when she should get married. Her mom gave her an ultimatum and said she'd disown her if she went through with her decision. My stepdaughter stopped talking to her ever since, and my wife said that from now on, she doesn't have a daughter. I thought that was too much for my stepdaughter. I stayed in contact with her, and after a few weeks, my stepdaughter sent me a wedding invitation. I gotta say, I felt a little hesitant thinking about my wife's reaction, but my stepdaughter told me that she felt hurt and alone as our wedding approaches when she's supposed to be happy and excited. She even cried when she spoke with me on the phone last week. My wife found out and lashed out at me because the invitation had my name only and berated me for wanting to go to support my stepdaughter and was upset that my daughter ignored her and didn't even call her to invite her to the wedding. I flat out told my wife that she should have handled the situation better instead of driving her daughter away like that. But my wife got upset and accused me of supporting my stepdaughter's callousness and selfishness and told me not to go as long as she isn't going. I called her unreasonable, and clearly she's mad at me for not calling my stepdaughter and berating her for not inviting her mother after she disowned her. Well, who do you agree with? OP or his wife? Please let us know.
Some of you guys writing these stories need to stop marrying such Karens.
Am I the jerk for refusing to cook for my boyfriend's daughter even though she had a breakdown? I've been dating this guy, Mark, who has a 14-year-old kid, Jennifer, for a while now. I've only met her a couple of times, so we aren't that close. I started seeing her often after I moved in with Mark, during his custody time. We get along fine, and I think we're bonding well. There's just one issue. Since I grew up in poverty, I hate wasting food. Jennifer has an issue with food. I'm not talking about being a little cranky when hungry. She would cry and scream and even break things if dinner gets delayed by half an hour. During her last visit, work was very hectic for me and Mark. Mark had to go to the office while I worked from home. Since I knew how busy I would be end of day and how Jennifer gets, I woke up early to prepare breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I informed her the same. End of day, I am in so many meetings and calls, and Jennifer barged in 15 minutes past her dinner time and told me serve her dinner. I reminded her that the dinner was in the fridge and all she had to do was heat it up. She comes back 15 minutes later and told me that she threw the food away and now she wanted me to give her a snack for the time being and make her something else. I told her that I'm not going to do that and then locked myself inside the study. I could hear her screaming and crying and I refused to give in. Once my work was done, 2 hours later, she was still crying. She never heated the dinner. She tried it cold, didn't like it, threw the entire dinner for 3 away, and then started demanding me for a freshly cooked dinner. She begged me to cook her something, and I told her that I already did cook her something and that she threw it away. I told her she can either cook for herself or wait until her father comes home and he can cook for her. I went to bed hungry as I was so tired. Next day, Mark told me that he didn't get home until midnight and she was still sobbing when he arrived. Although he agrees that Jennifer was acting entitled, he also says that I should have just cooked her something once my work was done, as I knew about her food issues instead of letting her cry for hours. I got upset and told him that I'm not cooking for either of them anymore. Am I the jerk here? Edit. She isn't diagnosed with anything. What would you have done? Would you have cooked something else for her or not? Please let us know.
Yeah, I would have cooked her a knuckle sandwich. The nerve of that kid.
Customer threatens to sue me because he decided to jump a turnstile. Quick backstory. So when I was just out of high school, I worked in a small liquor store in a high-risk area. Other than the pay, the job was pretty good, and the manager loved me, took my side in basically anything because I was usually right, and he had a policy that if customers are being a problem, boot them. So it's a cold winter night, and we're about to lock up. I'm mopping the floors while my coworker is closing out her till, and here they come. Our cast. We've got me, we've got my coworker, and we've got these two valued customers, 1 and 2. As I'm putting my mop away, coworker tells me I should come watch this on the security camera. There's 2 guys running at the store, full-on sprint, trying to make it in before we lock up in 5 minutes. My rule is simple. If you get in before I lock the doors, I'll serve you. But if you take longer than 10 minutes after close, I'll ask you to leave with no purchase because it's after 1 a.m. and I want to get some sleep. So customer 1 comes barreling into the store and instead of walking in like a normal person, he decides to try and jump the turnstile at the entrance to stop shoplifters from trying to run out of the front door. And lo and behold, as he runs past the wet floor sign directly in front of the turnstile, he slips and only makes it halfway and collides directly with the arm of the turnstile tip to tip. His buddy helps pick him up, laughing at him, and they start browsing. Coworker goes outside and locks the doors and finishes up closing until my till is the only thing left to do. Lo and behold, their 10 minutes are up and they haven't made a single choice yet. I pipe up. Hey, you guys, the store closed 10 minutes ago. I need you to pick whatever you want now or leave. Well, customer 1 takes offense to me telling him that he has to leave the store and replies, "You know I got hurt on your property, so I can take however long I'd like, and you should be giving me everything I want for at least half off, if not free, unless you want me to sue you." Him and customer 2 started laughing and walking around joking about what they should help themselves do. Coworker looks at them like they are idiots and tells them that they can get the heck out of the store right now or she will call the police and have them removed. Well, once again, customers 1 and 2 don't like being told what to do and walk up to the counter snickering and ask how we would like going to court. I look at them, tired, and tell them that right now they have 2 choices. 1, they buy something and leave now or we call the police. Coworker already has the phone all ready to go and that we don't care if they sue us because we don't own the store and that his injury was self-inflicted. He ignored the wet floor sign and tried to jump the turnstile when he could have just walked through. Customer 1. Well, can I at least get a discount? Customer 2 at this point realizes that we are serious as he grabs the closest 12-pack and says, "Okay, we'll get this and leave." So here we are, 20 to 30 minutes after closing and finally get to go home. Those 2 never did bother to come back or sue us, but I still made sure my manager got all the footage ready just in case. Am I the jerk for telling my grandparents not to bother visiting me and my baby after they have ignored me for the last 28 years? I'm the first grandchild of my grandparents. They've always lived in a different state to me, and I've met them a handful of times. They've never really made an effort to be involved in my life. I've never received as much as a card from them. I've never asked for anything, and I don't expect anything. I'm not sure why they haven't been involved in my life, but I'm 28 now, and I don't care about it. When I became pregnant earlier in the year, my dad said I should call and tell them. So I did, because I love my dad and thought it would be nice, but I wish that I hadn't. During the phone call, she said, word for word, "Sorry I haven't been in touch. You know how things are." Well, no, I don't actually. But yeah, thanks for ignoring me for 28 years. When my son was born and I announced it, I got a message from my grandmother. It said, "Congratulations, etc." She complained about her hip and said they would come and visit as soon as possible. I basically gray-rocked her and said that it wasn't necessary. If they were to visit, I would prefer it to be sometime next year, as I'm trying to establish a routine with my baby, and of course everything going on. She didn't reply to me, and then on my birthday last week, she sent me another message saying they were coming in January and to hug the baby for us. Now, I understand that they're excited, but I don't appreciate people who have had literally nothing to do with me expecting to now have a part in my life simply because I've had a baby. It feels fake. It feels like I'm not enough, and like all they care about is that I've made them great-grandparents. And quite frankly, I don't care much about them. I had a really rough upbringing, and they know that. They never checked on me or asked me if I was okay or needed anything. I don't feel obligated to have a relationship with them. My dad has said the way that they've ignored me is BS. Should I just let them visit? Note that they would not be staying with me. So, am I the jerk for telling them to not visit me? ETA. I agree it's confusing that I called them in the first place. I felt kind of pressured from my dad to do it. He had asked me and then kept pestering me about it. I did it without really thinking it through and the potential consequences. I never expected her to want to visit. I regret calling them. I have 2 younger siblings from my dad's remarriage. They've gotten slightly more attention than me growing up. If they came to visit, they would have the opportunity to see them as well. When I was born, they told my father that my mother was a jerk who would burn in heck and that they hated my name. Give me that charger. So I have an orange and black portable charger that I've had for 4 years now, and that thing has saved my life quite a few times. It has 4 USB ports and a high-powered light, so it's pretty great. The thing about mine, however, is that my port closest to the light doesn't work. I don't know why, overuse I think, so I use the other ones. Enter entitled mom and entitled kid. I'd seen them around a bit, but had never talked to them, which is unusual as I live in quite a small community. But now I know a lot about them. For context, this was in a local cafe I frequent on the weekends. A family-owned, everyone is welcome kind of deal. Well, entitled parent and entitled kid enter and immediately spot me sitting down, sipping my tea. Yes, I'm Scottish. We drink a lot of tea. And charging my phone with the charger. They almost run at me, and they say, in the worst Ned or idiotic accent imaginable, entitled mom.
Excuse me, what is that?
Points at charger. Me. Oh, it's a portable charger. It's like a power outlet for entitled parent cutting me off.
I know that.
I meant, can we use it? Me, wondering how what's that translates to can we use it? Sorry, but I don't let people use my things usually. Why do you need it? I'm thinking that if their phones are dead, they can use my charger to get them up and running. Her phone was at 47%. Yeah, that's not gonna cut it. Me. Sorry, your phone doesn't need charging. It has 47%.
Oh, come on. It isn't full. Give me the charger.
She reaches for it, as does the kid, but I pull it away and stow it in my bag. Me. Sorry, I need to go now. I quickly sip up the last drop of tea and head to the counter to pay. I see them following, so tell the worker, who I'm friends with, about them before I get there. She has also seen me with my charger. I leave just as they get to me, still clutching my bag, and head for home. I get home and realize that my charger isn't in my bag. I knew what had happened. They stole it when they came to the counter. I'm bummed, but have a smaller spare, so decided to go back to the cafe to see if I somehow left it. I arrive, and amazingly, entitled parent and entitled kid are sitting there using my charger out in the open. I calmly approach my friend and let her know, and she's in on it. Me, going up to entitled parent and entitled kid, who look really scared. Oh, thank goodness, you found my charger. I knew I had left it here. Thank you so much. Entitled mom.
This is mine. Go away, weirdo.
Me, realizing she isn't going down without a fight. Oh, okay. I can prove it's mine. I call my friend over like a stranger and tell her the story. Me. Is there anything wrong with this charger, miss? Entitled mom, confused.
No, it's brand new. Got it today. Go away. I want to be compensated for this intrusion.
Wow, she's dumb. Me. The charger nearest the light doesn't work on mine. Can we try this one? Entitled parent now tries to excuse herself to the toilet, realizing she's being found out. It fails, and she is forced to show that, indeed, the port doesn't work. Long story short, I get my charger back, and she is barred for a week, even though she apparently wasn't local, just on travels in the area, so probably thought she could grab and go with the charger. Me, 1, entitled parent and entitled kid, 0. My HOA complaint broke up an entitled mom's marriage. This happened a few years ago, but I still think about it. After being blessed with great neighbors over the years, I started taking it for granted. Then Luna, her 4 dogs, all the same breed, and family, 2 teens and a husband, moved in the house next door. It started off well enough. Luna was friendly and the kids and husband seemed nice, but she soon decided that the best place for her dogs to go potty was my backyard. I didn't agree, and after suffering in silence for a few weeks, I'm not very confrontational. I finally told her that my backyard wasn't her personal dog park. When they got home from work, they would let their dogs loose to go running in my backyard, to play and go potty. One day, I happened to catch them and came out on my patio to tell them to cut it out. The dogs turned around and started running towards me while barking aggressively. Fortunately, her husband called them off before the little ankle biters got to me. And it wasn't just the dog that liked to hang out in my backyard. Luna liked to walk around my backyard while talking on her phone. One of the things I like about my house is the privacy. It backs to the woods, so I don't have a lot of curtains on my back windows and doors. But since Luna liked walking around my yard, I was forced to curtail my habit of cleaning while not dressed. And it was creepy. Once, after it had snowed, I realized that someone had walked up to my back patio and had been peeping in my French doors. Not long after, someone left a gift of poo on my front porch welcome mat. Geez, I wonder who did that. But then, Luna seemed to want to repair our rather rocky relationship and asked me what time I got off work. We could do drinks and hang out. I thought, whatever. So I told her, but no get-together ever materialized. I realized later that she just wanted to know what time I got home from work. What she didn't know was that I sometimes worked at home. On one of those days, I caught her once again letting her dogs loose in my yard, so I took a photo and sent it to the HOA. I think she was also sneaking her dogs into my other neighbor's fenced backyard. The ramifications were swift. That complaint was the straw that broke the camel's back. The marriage was already on shaky ground, and the husband was tired of her and her dog hoarding. I only saw 4 dogs at a time, but there were more. I didn't notice because they all looked alike. The next thing I knew, she and the dogs had moved back to South America. The kids went to live with relatives/college, and the husband was acting like someone who won the lottery. He always seemed somewhat grumpy before, but after she left, he was smiling and friendly. Then he bought a Harley, got a girlfriend, and proceeded to rid the house of copious amounts of urine-stained carpets. He was eventually evicted from the house. Yes, they were renters, because owners were sick of the complaints and fines and decided to move back in. Luna apparently had a gift for upsetting the neighbors on my block. The weird thing is that there were a couple of vacant lots and a dog park less than a block away, but apparently her neighbors' yards were the best place to take her dogs. Am I the jerk for pressing charges? My cousin turned 18 recently. She's in high school. She doesn't have a car, and during her birthday weekend, thought her parents were going to buy her one. They didn't get her one, and she was pretty upset. I should note that I'm not very close with my cousin, or the rest of my extended family for that matter. I only heard about this through the grapevine from my dad. Anyway, my cousin texts me on the Friday before her birthday asking if she can take my car. I just leased a new Ford Escape, to the mall, and then for an out-of-town road trip with her friends over the weekend. I tell her no. She begs and pleads with me. I tell her no again. My car is for me to drive and for me only. If she wants her own car, she can save up and buy one. She calls me a jerk and says that I ruined her birthday and that she's embarrassed because her friends think she got a car for her birthday, but she doesn't have one. I don't respond to her and think nothing of it. The weekend comes and I sleep in very late on that Saturday, waking up at 1 p.m. Don't judge. Even though my car is parked in my driveway and my gate is closed, I come to realize that someone egged and TP'd my car with many, many eggs and 5 to 6 rolls of toilet paper. And since the weather was warm outside, the raw egg baked into my car along with the dried up toilet paper, destroying the paint. Since I have security cameras around my house, I decide to go back and watch. At around 9:30ish that morning, I see my cousin and a bunch of her stupid friends vandalizing my car. I'm surprised she didn't smash the windows and poke holes in the tires too. To save my post from the 3,000 character limit, I obviously pressed charges and my cousin is in legal trouble. Her and her parents are really upset with me for pressing charges. Her parents tell me that she's just a kid and that she's been through a lot of emotional stress doing virtual schooling for this past year, and that I should take that into consideration and that I should be ashamed of myself for pressing legal charges against my baby cousin, that I'm almost 30 and don't I remember what I was like at that age? I do remember, and I wasn't stupid enough to egg anyone's car. And can't she work something out with me, like doing chores around my house for money if I drop the charges? That she's young, that she doesn't need a felony on her record, etc., and that it was just a prank. Right after I pressed charges, my cousin was calling and texting me over and over saying that this could have been avoided had I let her take my car. Am I the jerk in this situation? I need to add that my cousin already has a felony on her record, a DUI. She's not remorseful of anything. Also, my aunt and uncle will not pay me for the damages. They just want me to drop the charges and pay for everything myself like nothing happened. They are cheap. Well, what do you think? Should OP drop the charges or not? Please let us know. Definitely don't drop the charges, but do send the security camera footage to anywhere that your cousin applies for a job. Got told to buzz off by my assignment group, so that's what I did. I do a computer science degree at university. We had a group work project which is set out in 2 stages. Part A involved making an application and writing a report about it, 50-50 split. Part B, we got feedback from Part A and had to improve upon it. In total, it was 100% of a module. It is also important to note that there's a group contribution report, GCR, where each student puts in how much they think each student has done. I was in a randomly selected group with 4 others. We each picked a part of the work that we wanted to do. I was apparently the group's most confident coder, so assigned myself about half of the code, and finished up my work in about the first 3 weeks and work on other projects I have for other modules. Then, soon after I finished my work, the others asked me if I could do their parts of the code too. I initially protest, as I have my other coursework due, but eventually I say fine, but so long as it is noted in the GCR and they all agree. I sweat it out over the next 3 weeks or so alongside my other coursework. I contacted my module organizer, explaining that I had done half the work, and they suggested if people weren't pulling their weight to leave the group, taking my code with me, and do the report. That would mean I would need to work flat out to produce the report and probably would mess it up. I didn't want that. The deadline was in about a week. Then I got asked to do some of the report too, because they didn't understand how the code worked. By this point, I felt pretty used by them. Didn't really mind so long as I got the marks. All in all, I worked out that I had done the workload of 3 people. There was talk amongst the others of all writing that we each contributed 20% of the workload to make us look better as a team. I flatly refused. They exploded, calling me every name under the sun, telling me to buzz off. I sent off my GCR with 60% for me and 10% for each of the rest, and thought that was that. My module organizer then emailed me, asking if I had any proof of this, as they all put me at 0 and themselves at 25. I emailed him back, linking him to the GitHub I used to share the code with a team. GitHub is a source control that shows who made changes to the code, and showed him that all of the commits, versions of the code, were done by me, proving that I did all of it. And thankfully, we did the whole report on Google Drive, so I could also see the history on that document and sent him screenshots of all the alterations made by me, proving that I wrote about 20% of the report also. He added it all up and made a special exception for my group, saying he would give me most credit for the work. I think I ended up getting a 65, and they all get 11 for the whole coursework, Part A. They would need 69% to even pass the module. So it turned out I messed up on a bit of the code, only getting about 50% of the marks, with like a massive issue in it. Dumb me. For anyone interested, I didn't make an MVC structure correctly, but my report sections were near perfect. Spelling mistakes, a common thing I do, and formatting, etc. There were a few glaring mistakes from the report that they had written, but other than that, not bad. When they found out their marks, they started calling me up and emailing me and messaging me almost for about 3 hours. I was happily out at the time and didn't have my phone with me, so I didn't respond. My module organizer sent an email explaining that they had lied, and he had proof about it, so corrected the marks accordingly. When I got back to my phone, I screenshot all of the messages that they had sent and recorded all of the voicemails, including the ones they had sent previously, including multiple occasions where everyone in the group had told me to buzz off. And buzz off I did. I sent all these voicemails and screenshots to my module organizer, requesting that I leave my group and understand that it is more work for me, but I'd rather not deal with that. He agreed and also escalated the messages to someone higher up. At this point, I quit the group and decided to work on Part B by myself, taking all of my code with me, removing their access to all of it. I, of course, asked my module organizer first, and they said it was fine as it was my work, and if I was no longer in their group, the others couldn't submit it. I fixed the error in the code in about 2 weeks, then did the whole report from scratch almost, and added a load about the fix, taking me about 7 weeks. I then get messages from the group to please come back, we really need you kind of stuff, on the few days of the assignment. They even offered to pay me. I screenshot it and send it to the module organizer, just to let him know what's happening, and then just ignore them. I ended up submitting 2 weeks early for the deadline and got 100% on the whole section 2, which is basically unheard at university, especially by yourself for group work. Later that day, I get an email from a plagiarism and collusion officer, not someone you ever want to get an email from. Basically says I'm summoned to a hearing as an external body looked at both my group, me, myself, and I, and my old group's coursework and thought it was very similar. I get the whole project that my group handed in and my own back as evidence so I can look and prepare my answer to their questions. I email my module organizer, ask if he supports me in this because basically they can punish all of you or one group, never nobody. He says yes, he supports me in this. Perfect. I prepare for this meeting by going through the hundreds of commits I have made while they had access to find the one that is most similar to it. I had a perfect match, 0 differences, not even a single character, through the thousands of lines of code. So I turn up to this meeting. There's the VP of computing there, guy who basically could do whatever the heck he wants to us. My old group, when asked to present their answer as to why this has happened, go on about how they did all of this by themselves, blah blah blah. You get the point. This goes on for about 10 minutes. Then I'm asked to present my argument. I ask if I can share my screen. VP, yeah, okay. Puzzled. So I share it. I show all of the screenshots I took, as some of the people in the meeting weren't aware that we knew each other, including them basically begging for me to come back, offering money to. And as if this wasn't enough to convince them, I then showed me downloading a fresh version of what they submitted and a fresh version of one of my commits on the GitHub and running it through a trusted comparison software. I narrated this to explain what I was doing just to be clear. Took a while, but came up as I knew it would. 0 differences. Everyone was stunned. One of the group members uttered, "But..." I just laughed and was quickly asked to hang up as I was no longer involved. Turned out they had cloned one of my commits and still had a copy on their laptop when I blocked their access, not being able to fix it at all, so just submitted it and hoped for the best. One of my friends, who is friends with one from the old group, asked what grade they got, and they said they all failed the whole module, as they got a 0 for the second section, giving them just 5.5% overall for the module. You need 40 to pass, and would have to retake it over the summer, costing them and everyone in my old group their placement year jobs. After all, who wants someone who failed a module so badly and who is intellectually dishonest working for them? This meant they had all lost out on being paid around $20,000 each for the year's work, which goes a long way for a uni student, while I happily get mine. Have you ever had to work with a group that you just couldn't stand? If so, how did it go? Please let us know. Every time I attend an HOA meeting, am I the jerk for telling my husband he's either married to me or his coworker? I'm 37, female, and my husband, 40, male, has been working at his company for 10 years as a maintenance supervisor. About a year ago, they hired Tabitha to work in their accounting department. Since the day she first started working there, she's had an infatuation with my husband that is now becoming very unprofessional. This started when the heat went out in her office. My husband's job as supervisor is to assign tasks to his employees. However, she is never satisfied with the work they do, even though he says that they do great work, so she demands he work on her office. She constantly calls him on his work phone for mundane things. Carpet is loose in a corner, loose screw on her coat hook, and he goes and fixes them without issue. Last year, when we went to the company Christmas party, pre-plague times, she was very flirty with him, constantly grabbed his hand. When he introduced us, she just grinned at me and said, "Look, there's Peter," and grabbed his hand and walked away. When we sat at the table, she darn near pushed me out of my seat to sit next to him, and my husband told her to get up, that it was my seat. She walked off in a huff, and when she saw me in the restroom, she shoved past me. I told my husband what happened, and he said it was fine, that she was harmless. I told him that she was not fine, and that she clearly has feelings for him, and she was acting like a jealous girlfriend. The past few weeks, this has ramped up to an astonishing level. She recently moved into a new house, and my husband and some of the other guys from work helped her move and put her things together. He gave her his personal cell phone number, and she's been calling and texting nonstop about things that she needs help with. Multiple times a day, at all hours of the day and night, she will call and text him for help. Last night at 2 a.m., she called about her heat not working right. My husband said he would go over and look at it after work. I broke down. I told him he was not going, and that she could call a technician like everyone else, and that he is not her personal maintenance man. I told him very clearly that she has feelings for him, and he is so dense he can't see it. I told him that while it is nice to help on occasion, she calls him all the time asking for help with things that she can do on her own, like moving boxes or furniture, or pay to have a repair person come and fix. I told him that once he gave out his personal phone number, that he crossed a line, and I am not comfortable with it. He said that this will most likely be an easy fix and it won't take long. So I cried and told him that he can either be married to me or married to her, but I wasn't going to be the third wheel in my own marriage. He says he does not have feelings for her and that I am overreacting to him just wanting to help a friend. I feel otherwise. Am I the jerk? Well, who do you agree with? OP or her husband? Please let us know.
I'd kick him out is what I'd do. If you can't respect my feelings, you don't deserve my love.
Dad acts like I'm obligated to spend the holidays with him. I was raised by a single father with whom I rarely saw eye to eye. He tried to mold me into his views of traditional masculinity, the good and the bad. He'd praise me when I excelled in certain roles, like a handyman or football player, but then be dismissive over crying or being bullied at school. He took his role as the disciplinary figure very seriously, even during the holiday season. My dad always throws a party for our family every Thanksgiving and Christmas. He provides great food, and some of my relatives are pretty decent. However, my dad is a terrible host. He had everyone come over, including people who are toxic to be around. I swear, every single year, there's always some fight about the pettiest of things. All the vegans get is a salad? The kids shouldn't watch anything with Santa in it? A gift card? You couldn't have just sent me money? It's like they're so obsessed with making everything perfect that anything not going their way is unacceptable. On top of all of that, my dad pretty much makes the parties all about him. He tries to micromanage a lot of the activities, from the movies we'd watch to whatever we made conversation about. The worst was when he'd brag about me into sounding like he molded me into his views on traditional masculinity. He'll brag about how I was the MVP in youth football even though I hated it, or that I kicked butt in martial arts even though that's not what it was about, nor why I enjoyed it. When I mention achievements I'm actually proud of, like taking up creative writing or a new book I'm reading, he'll pay no heed. My dad says he's happy I have a girlfriend, and he also says he's glad I didn't turn out with a guy. As far as gifts go, he'd only get me things that he approved of, whether I wanted them or not. New boxing gloves or clay pigeons? Heck yeah. A PS4 or a 3DS? Could be worse. A journal or the entire Harry Potter book series? No, I won't do that to you. Basically, I've come to associate the holidays with my dad asserting more dominance than usual and being forced to interact with toxic family members. Fortunately for me, my girlfriend's dad invited me to spend both Thanksgiving and Christmas with them. Finally, I think I'll get to enjoy myself for a change. Then, earlier today, my dad called asking me when I'm coming over for Thanksgiving. I told him I already said I wasn't coming and that I'd be going to my girlfriend's place. He said things like, "You always spend the holidays with your old man," or "Your cousins like seeing you, you know?" My cousins have stopped coming over for the holidays for years. I tried arguing that inviting family over might not be a good idea anyway due to what's going on. People like my grandpa or Uncle Devin are at higher risk. He called BS on that since "You don't seem worried about giving your girlfriend the sickness." I've tested negative and nobody coming over is at high risk. Then my dad went on this tirade. "Oh, I see how it really is. You still think I'm a terrible father, right? You'd rather throw me and your whole family under the bus when all we want is to spend the holidays with you. I'm offering you free food and family time, but you'd rather flush it down the drain than be grateful I'm even allowing you into my home. You're welcome, by the way." I've told my dad many times how bad he makes me feel, about myself or even just in general. He'd argue, "I gave you everything you needed to survive in this tough world. If I made you feel that bad, how'd you get so good at karate? You wouldn't even know how to get a girlfriend if it weren't for me." In other words, my feelings are invalid because I still succeeded in some aspects of my life. Seeing as we weren't getting anywhere, I hung up. I hate it when my dad guilt trips me like this because as much as everyone's told me he's wrong, there's still some part of me that feels like I should feel guilty. I get that Christmas and Thanksgiving are about family, but for once, I'd like to be with a family that's actually fun to be around. Others have said I should be grateful I even have a dad, let alone one that's taken care of me. That's like having a dog that barks and bites you is better than being petless. I don't know. I just want a nice holiday season for once. Thanks for hearing me out. I don't have many other outlets to vent outside of Reddit, and I'd rather not dump all of this on my girlfriend. Have you ever had to deal with parents who treat you like this? If so, how did it make you feel? Please let us know.
I'd tell him that I'll go spend the holidays with him once he learns how to treat me like a human being.
Am I the jerk for kicking out my boyfriend when he lied about going to online college? The consensus so far, according to all my friends and family, is that I'm the jerk. But I feel like they're all biased towards my boyfriend and not listening to my side of the story. Alex and I have been dating since high school. We've been together 8 years. Last year, he decided to start college for a degree in graphic design, and his parents are paying for his tuition. He was living in a college dorm first semester. Then everything started, and he was removed from campus housing, and we decided to move in together. He was supposed to be doing college online via Zoom or Google or whatever. I work a full-time job and a part-time job, and I pay for all of the bills. Alex contributes $200 towards the $900 rent, which he gets from his parents. I've been supporting him without any complaints because I know when he's graduated, he'll be able to support both of us on a nicer salary than what I make as a grocery clerk and delivering pizza. Last week, Alex confessed to me that he finished second semester of freshman year online and then decided to drop out because he didn't like the online classes. Up until now, I was under the impression that he was still in class because he spent most of his time on his laptop. I asked if he was looking for a job, and he said no. He said his job is keeping the house clean and cooking dinner, but I feel like that's minimal effort. We live in a tiny apartment. We do not have pets, we do not have kids. Vacuuming once a week and making a meal for 2 people is not a real job. I took his keys and told him to leave. My name is on the apartment lease, and I pay the rent. I think we were both thinking it'd just be for a night or 2, but it's been a week now, and he's only come back once to get some of his stuff he forgot. I haven't packed anything up yet, and I'm not sure if I want him gone for good or not. I really don't think this is worth breaking up over, and I love living together with him, but I don't want to support an able-bodied adult man if he's not at least trying to do something to better himself. He's staying at his mom's house now, and she's upset with me. My own parents think I'm being ridiculous and overreacting. Our friends have all taken his side, and one of them even called me horrible for kicking him out. Alex hasn't said one way or the other whether he wants to come back. We actually haven't spoken/messaged much at all since I kicked him out. Am I the jerk? Well, what do you think? Was it wrong for OP to kick out her boyfriend or not? Please let us know. No, kicking him out was the best thing she could have done. The boy's already got one mummy, he doesn't need 2. Restaurant team can't figure out their billing software. I set it up for them and print my own bill. Background. This happened nearly a decade ago. I was working at a startup e-commerce venture. We were a small team, and it was my job to put in the processes and train the staff. Every month, I would work on one department and document the IT, reporting, and other processes they need to follow, train them, and identify the person who could lead the team. It was my practice to invite the most promising employees and take them out for either drinks or a meal and get to know them better before coming to a decision. There were several restaurants and bars near our office, one of which I never patronized as it was too upscale. One day I noticed that one of the girls I was keen to promote as a team lead for the customer support team was about to have a meltdown at work. I quickly pulled her off the floor immediately and took her to this upscale place, both to let her feel that she was valued as well as get a bit of privacy so I could understand all her issues. The incident. We had what would be called a high tea and were ready to leave when one of the servers requested if we could wait for a few minutes before they bring the bill to us. I had a meeting with one of the directors, so I left my company card with this girl, asked her to settle the bill, and rejoin her team after clearing the bill. My meeting went on for half an hour, and when I went to get my card back, the girl had not returned to work. I feared that she might have tried to run away with the card or something, so I quickly rushed to the restaurant, only to find her still waiting for the mysterious bill. I lost my cool and threatened the manager that they could not keep a patron waiting, and I was going to call the cops on them for not letting the girl leave while not presenting the bill at the same time. Till this time, the staff was trying to avoid presenting the bill. Now, they admitted the software that they ran had been upgraded that day, and none of them could make it work. They were waiting for someone from the IT team to come and update them. In the meantime, they didn't think of putting the close sign because no customers came in at that time of the day. It was amusing to say the least, and I didn't want the poor staff to pay out of their pockets for our meal. I don't know what came over me, and I asked them to show me the system. I was used to setting up systems and in short order figured out where they were messing up and took the notepad the servers used to take orders and wrote step-by-step instructions for them and printed the bill for my own meal. Then I taught them to link the card machine to their system, printed my own bill, and swiped my card. By this time, the news that I was setting up the billing system for the restaurant had spread like wildfire in our office, as I had asked my colleague to go back to her station and she couldn't keep this juicy tale to herself. The fallout. When I was done, I saw the director of my company waiting for me. He was negotiating with the restaurant chain for hiring out my services to them. I was only thankful no one got fired in this whole fiasco. Am I the jerk for refusing to go to my brother's wedding after he told me not to bring my husband with me? I'm female, 29, and my brother, who's 33, has a wedding on Sunday. Everyone helped with paying for the wedding except for me because I had other things to take care of. My husband got into an accident that caused a spinal cord injury that left him wheelchair bound for 2 years now. My brother got upset I didn't help with pain, but then told me it was okay. My brother doesn't have the best relationship with my husband, and there were a lot of arguments between them in the past. My family would visit regularly, and my brother asked what my husband does since I work and take care of my husband and pay for things. I never complained, so I'm not sure why he'd say this. He'd tell me he's concerned that life will pass me by if I stayed like this and enabling my husband's attitude. My brother would complain whenever he asks me to do something for him, and his fiance and I tell him I'm busy taking care of my husband at the time between therapy, doctor's appointments, and going out to buy stuff from the store. 2 days ago, my brother called me to tell me about sending an invitation and said that I should leave my husband at home and come alone. I was so mad at him, I tried to find out why, but he told me that it's just a few hours and that he found it unnecessary to burden myself with my husband and that I should get a break. I told him that I will not be coming to his wedding after he told me this, and I immediately hung up on him. He tried to call and basically said the same thing, trying to convince me. He then had his fiance calling me. She probably heard that I wasn't coming, but I didn't answer her calls. My mom spoke with me and complained that she was okay with me missing on family dinners/celebrations, but I should come to my brother's wedding since my relatives asked to see me. This caused an argument between me and my family. My husband knew eventually from all these phone calls I was receiving. He remained quiet all day, which was unusual, and he finally broke down at night and started crying, saying that my brother probably didn't want him there because of him being in a wheelchair. I was so devastated and didn't know what to say. I called my mom after that and told her I wasn't going to attend. She went on about how I was trying to make my brother upset on his wedding day and how this will cause him hurt that he may not be able to forget in his lifetime. My dad wants to visit to talk to me, and I'm feeling so tired because of this. Well, what do you think? Should OP go to her brother's wedding or not? Please let us know.
No, and she shouldn't be talking to him either. That guy's got some nerve.
Am I the jerk for helping my former students despite my girlfriend telling me not to? I, 33, male, used to teach history at high school A for 5 years. During my time there, I also ran the school's debate team. The school I worked at was fairly small, so I was able to get to know my students fairly well. I had an open door policy with all of my students and those on the debate team. I gave my phone number to my students, which did not go against any school/district/state policy, and told them that they could text me and we could arrange a time to talk before, after, or during school. While I was at that school A, I had 2 students, Travis and Rose, that I regularly interacted with for 3 years. They were both on the debate team for 3 years, and I had them in my classes for those last 2 years. They were amazing students, and they never abused my open door policy. This past June, my girlfriend, 31 female, of 5 months and I moved to a city 3 hours away to teach at high school B. I didn't hear a word from any of my former students after the move until last Friday. Travis and Rose sent me a group text in the evening asking if I was willing to join a Zoom call with them sometime soon. They explained to me that they were being bullied in person and harassed online by a group of seniors. They gathered a lot of evidence but wanted my input on if it would be enough to get the school to do something. I agreed to do a Zoom call with them the following day. During the Zoom call, both students were at their wits' end. I spent the first 20 minutes of the call with them just having a normal conversation and offering some assurances as needed. My girlfriend walked into my office during this period and demanded that I leave the call right away. I quickly excused myself and took her out of the room where she started yelling at me. She claimed that I was being inappropriate and should not be talking to Travis and Rose anymore since they're no longer my students. I tried to explain that they trust me and needed someone to help them, so I was not about to turn them away. She then claimed that I should stop with my open door policy altogether because it's creepy for someone my age to be texting and meeting up with them. It's important to note that my girlfriend has known about the open door policy and never once complained about it until that night. When I mentioned that to her, she stammered a bit before walking away. I then resumed my meeting with Travis and Rose, which lasted for roughly an hour. Ever since, my girlfriend won't talk to me and insists that I'm being a creep. She has turned a few of my friends against me, and some others say that I shouldn't have spoken to Travis and Rose to begin with. I don't think I was in the wrong here, but I want to see what Reddit might have to say. Well, who do you agree with? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know.
I admire how kind OP is, but for the sake of his career, I think he should listen to his girlfriend.
Entitled mom goes off because wife and I spend our money on things we need. A bit of background. I moved out of home when I was 18. I am now 30 and married, living with my wife. Since I left my home 12 years ago, I have worked full-time, including 10 years in the military. I am completely independent from my parents and have been the entire time. I have never relied on or asked them for anything. I have 2 sisters who still live at home. They both work casual and study. They are both shocking with money, constantly going overseas on holidays or to concerts and festivals with friends, just blowing every cent they earn. Their choice though, good on them. Me, I've been on 1 overseas holiday for my honeymoon, but that's it. I save money every week and always have. I have fun too. I just make sure that if I can help it, I don't go backwards. Yet, for some reason, entitled mom is always on my back about money. Not my sisters, just me. Whenever I spend anything, it's a big deal. She also has this thing about my wife not earning enough. She works full-time and makes a decent salary, just not quite what mine is. It doesn't matter. We're a team, and my wife is amazing. She does a lot for us in so many other aspects of our life. Entitled mom is always saying that my wife is just playing me for my money, and one of these days she will leave me and take half, which she apparently hasn't earned. Well, that's all BS. My wife and I have a great marriage. She's an amazing woman, and even if she did become unhappy and want to leave, she would absolutely deserve half, as income is only a small part of what someone brings to a marriage, and my wife is an absolute star. Honestly, I think it just makes entitled mom mad that we don't need her. So anyway, the story. Recently, there was a large hailstorm in my city. There was widespread damage. Thousands of vehicles were destroyed, including my wife's car. Luckily, the car was insured, and after a couple of weeks, we received a decent payout. Although my wife loved her car, we did see this as a bit of a blessing in disguise, as we had an old personal loan outstanding as well as a credit card with a little owing also. The plan was to completely pay off both of these, close the accounts, and with what was left, buy my wife a car. Then, if there was still some left, we would put some extra cash against our home loan. Yes, I know it sounds like we are drowning in debt. I assure you, we are not. Our situation is very manageable. We make all payments on time and still manage to put something away every week for ourselves. So anyway, this was all a few weeks back, and since then, we have done all of the above as planned. We are extremely happy as we have wiped a lot of our debt, everything except the home loan, and my wife loves her new car despite it being a bit of a downgrade. Since all of this occurred, I had not heard from entitled mom. My parents are retired and traveling the country in a caravan, so I'm not bothered by this. Yesterday, I decided to call and check in. Things are normal at first. Conversation is pleasant, but I can tell entitled mom has something on her mind, so I ask if something's wrong. The floodgates are opened. She's been holding this in for weeks. I paraphrase, but here's how it went down. Entitled mom.
I'll tell you what's wrong. Your wife spending $35,000 on a car when you have a home loan to think about. Your wife is manipulative and selfish, and you are a gutless pushover. She will send you broke, and your father and I won't be there to pick up the pieces.
Me. Whoa, what the heck? First of all, why on earth do you think we spent that on a car? Where would you have even got that number from? Reminder, I haven't spoken to entitled mom in weeks. As far as I know, she had no idea we had bought the car yet.
Your sister showed me your wife's Snapchat story. There was a photo of the car with the price in the window, so don't lie to me.
Me. Well, that photo was taken before we even spoke with a dealer. The price in the window was $32,000, not $35,000, and that was the original price. There was a sale on, dropping at $6,000, and I was able to talk them down further, $3,000. On top of all that, my mother-in-law gave my wife some of her nan's inheritance to go towards it. Entitled mom, casually moving past the part where she was wrong.
Well then, tell me what you paid for it.
You know what? No. I don't owe you an explanation, and after the way you just attacked me, you won't get one. If you wanted to know, maybe you could have called and asked how we were going with the car situation at some point over the last few weeks, but I haven't heard from you, and our finances are none of your business anyway. Entitled mom hangs up. Haven't heard a thing from her in days now, and don't expect to for a while. Spoke to my dad. His advice is, don't poke the bear. Makes me laugh. Apparently, my wife is manipulative and I am a pushover. Yeah, sure. Might be time to go no contact for a bit. So Karen, what did you think of today's stories?
They were horrible.
Horrible? How dare you? These were some of the best we've ever read.
Oh, shut up, Mr. Reddit. It's ridiculous what people like myself have to go through. Dealing with stupid people like yourself and your subscribers.
Look, Karen, you can say whatever you want about me, but don't you talk about my re-army.
Re-army. Most of your viewers aren't even subscribed to your channel. 70% if I'm correct.
Well, I can't argue with that. That's true. Most of my viewers don't actually subscribe for some reason.
It's because you're stupid, Mr. Reddit.
No, I'm not! Alright guys, let's prove Karen wrong by making sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on notifications.
They're not going to listen to you.
And if you'd like me, or Karen,
What?
to record a special message for you, come visit me on Fiverr, link pinned in the comments below.
Never.
And join as a channel member today, and Karen will give you a special shout out in the next video.
Like heck I will.